Good morning, all, and welcome. Here we are for our first session on the budget. And if you all take your places, I will go through roll call. Madam Clerk is just taking a last count before just as everybody's grabbing their seats. And so, Madam Clerk, thank you. All members are present except Mayor Brown, Councillor Demerla, Councillor Fonseca is not here, Councillor McFadden and Medeiros are not here, and all other members are present. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Councillor Sado.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a conflict on the non-union salary part of the budget, which I guess would relate to 6.2. I did file the form with the clerk earlier in the week.
Thank you.
And I have a family member working for the region.
Thank you, and duly noted. Anybody else with a conflict of interest? Seeing none. Approval of the agenda. That is moved by Councillor Kovacs, seconded by Councillor Groves. All those in favor? That is carried. Delegations and presentations. What I thought I'd start with is before we get opening remarks from our CAO, interim CAO, I thought the clerk might outline the process, the days that we've set aside, what we hope to achieve today and in the days going forward. So through to the clerk, just a moment to set the framework for us, please.
Thank you. So today is the budget overview by the CAO and the CFO, and each of the commissioners will speak to their current services provided. Today is information gathering and sharing, not necessarily decision making. Next week, December 5th, the external agencies, including the police and the conservation authorities, will be presenting. More information gathering, more sharing. December 12th, there is a regional council meeting, and following the regional council meeting, there will be a further budget meeting. The reports you have before you today will be deferred today to the 5th, and then likely deferred on the 5th to the 12th. So these discussions are the budget-oriented discussions as opposed to policy-oriented decisions. And as per usual in January, there will be a report coming about apportionment, and in the spring there will be the levy report as per usual. So that just sets the stage for today's meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Sado.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to ask a question of process.
Certainly.
So if an item is on the agenda, on either this or a regular council agenda, as correspondence, and clerks has marked it for receipt, under that we cannot move a motion on that correspondence. However, it puts council in an awkward position when clerks has determined that it's only for receipt. So I guess I have a concern with that because staff are then determining that council cannot take any action on a matter of correspondence.
Okay, and this relates to the budget.
Yes.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
The correspondence, yes, pursuant to our procedure bylaw, section 5.8B, no motions other than motions for receipt or a motion directing staff to report to council or committee shall arise from an item of correspondence.
But then it says that is there for receipt.
Correct.
So by marking it, because correspondence is not always indicated by staff as receipt, sometimes there's a recommendation or action. So that determination is made by staff when it actually should be made by council, because it precludes council being able to deal with a matter of correspondence other than what staff thinks it should be.
The options that typically we would put on are either referral to staff or
Exactly.
receipt. And a referral to staff is still permitted, even if it's marked for receipt.
Okay. I guess going forward, I mean, that's the way it is today, but I would suggest that's an issue that we deal with at our governance committee, procedural committee, because it really precludes council from taking action on correspondence, other than just referring or receiving.
And when it was reviewed the last time, that was the intent of the committee last term. is to ensure that there were no motions coming out of correspondence without previous notice or an opportunity for staff to be able to report back more
Okay.
fully than on the correspondence. So there was a rationale for it. It was
Right.
changed last term.
And I was on that committee, I probably should remember that, but
From
that was last term.
Yeah, as opposed to bringing a
Okay.
separate motion on an item in the correspondence that
Right.
proper notice had been given to,
Okay.
for council to actually.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate the clarity.
But a fair question to be followed up on accordingly, yeah. Okay, with that, I come to 5.1, opening remarks. Nancy Polzinelli, Interim Chief Administrative Officer.
Good morning, Chair Yanika and members of council. I'm joined by the region's executive leadership team to present the proposed 2020 budget. The Chief Financial Officer, Stephen Van Offwegen, will provide a more detailed overview of the budget in a few moments. I'd like to begin with some context. At the region, our work is guided by a long-term vision, building a community for life. This means delivering the efficient, effective services that residents and businesses need today. It also means sustaining the longer-term progress that ensures the residents of Peel will continue to have a high quality of life well into the future. Such a vision puts the focus on people and their needs at every stage of life. This year, we saw value in having that vision to guide us because, as you know, it's been a unique and challenging year to develop a municipal budget in Ontario. In last year's budget presentation, staff highlighted some potential risks related to the decisions the province could make. And as we all know, the province did make announcements that impact the municipal finances. The way in which these announcements were rolled out also created a more challenging environment in comparison with recent years. In 2019, staff have come to council 8 times to report on budget impacts resulting from provincial announcements. This is unprecedented. In the end, the scope and scale of provincial changes impacting the region's budget are not as significant as they may have seemed as recently as this summer. However, the province has reduced its commitment in certain areas. This has put council in the position of deciding how resulting gaps in the region's budget will be addressed. In previous council meetings, staff have identified potential impacts on taxes, impacts on people, and impacts on the community. Council's direction regarding these choices has informed the budget we present to you today, which includes an increase in the net tax levy of 4.3%. At Council's direction, staff will investigate any further options for adjusting the net tax levy. Nevertheless, this increase is a significant change for the community and for Council to communicate to residents and businesses. Prior to 2019 and for 9 consecutive years, the region's net tax levy has been in line with inflation. As with those previous budgets, we are presenting a budget today that is careful and deliberate in what it asks from its taxpayers. This has mitigated the amount to the net tax levy increase proposed in the budget. For its overall base budget, the region holds the line to inflationary increases. In the areas where the proposed budget does increase spending, it is about people and communities and the need to invest today in their future potential. For example, Council has chosen to avoid child care wait lists because those early years are vital to growth and because parents need access to child care when they're building their own future. Council has chosen to move forward in supporting the development of community hubs because voices in the communities tell us that these supportive spaces are needed to help change the trajectory of lives. Council has chosen to prioritize community safety because Peel residents should feel safe in their homes, their neighborhoods, and in public spaces. Our legacy of striving for efficiency and innovation served the region well in preparing for this budget. Most divisions found existing internal resources to maintain incremental progress towards a community for life. We have prioritized investments critical to ensuring the region keeps pace with community growth, infrastructure needs, and the pace of technology. In short, the budget invests carefully in all areas across the region's spending so that Council can invest compassionately in a few areas where the needs are great, the risk to the vulnerable is acute, and community progress is at risk. I'd like to provide some context to this budget. We recognize that Council may continue to discuss how regional and municipal services are organized. This budget today is based on how the region is structured today. In this 2020 budget, there are 4 major drivers contributing to the increase in the net tax levy. The first driver, as I mentioned, is community safety. People in Peel are increasingly concerned about crime and safety. In the immediate term, $6.6 million is being added to the budget by Peel Regional Police for 35 officers. This investment is about strengthening enforcement today to protect people and target offenders. Over the longer term, upstream work is addressing root causes of crime and aims to reduce the number of offenders. This upstream work not only improves the lives of those who are supported, it is also an investment that can result in lower policing costs in the years ahead. This is a term of Council priority, and work is underway through the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, which includes 25 organizations across Peel. It has identified priorities such as systemic oppression and discrimination, family violence, and mental health and addiction. And there will be a focus on youth as a population of interest. The second driver is delivering on Council direction. Council has identified community hubs as a critical investment in high-need neighborhoods. As outlined in Council's resolution from September 26, 2019, the 2020 capital budget will support community youth hubs in Mississauga and Brampton. The Community Hub Planning Framework identifies a continuing role for the region in areas such as access to and synthesis of data, building partnerships among service providers, and funding and supporting strong business planning to ensure success. Enhancing senior support and services is also a Council direction where progress continues. This includes continued expansion of the butterfly model of compassionate care to the region's Tall Pine long-term care home. The third driver is maintaining service levels in areas where the province has withdrawn its funding. As mentioned in my introduction, this pertains mostly to maintaining access to childcare. The province has reduced its commitment to funding the expansion plan for childcare from 100% to 80%. In doing so, that has put a significant onus on municipal governments to increase their investments so that residents do not experience service level reductions. Council made the difficult decision to invest additional funds to avoid a wait list. In order to strike that balance, Council made the equally difficult decision to end a daily rate subsidy program that was provided to all families regardless of income. Now, a provincial tax credit will begin, and it will focus benefits on low and moderate income families. But ending the daily rate subsidy is a service change, one that will have an impact on some families using childcare. The province has also made changes to how it funds long-term care. These changes also contribute to an increased cost to the region, though not as significant as in childcare. The fourth and final driver is in maintaining consistency in services residents and businesses need and use every day. For the region, maintaining consistency in services never means standing still. We continually seek improvements in both efficiency and effectiveness. There are also pressures which can come from population growth, inflation, and other factors that we do not fully control. When the province doesn't fully account for such pressures in their municipal funding, maintaining consistency becomes even more challenging. In paramedic services, for example, funding for service growth and inflation will not be provided until the year after it happens. So this makes it more challenging to address increases in 911 calls. These are the four major drivers impacting the net tax levy. Many of the changes I described may continue to impact future budgets. The province has expressed a commitment to balance its own finances in the years ahead. So this can mean further changes to funding partnerships. However, the evolving relationship with the province is only one of the external factors that will shape our work in years ahead. Other longer-term pressures include the aging of the population, global movement of people, the transformation towards a knowledge economy, and responding and adapting to climate change. As you know, municipal governments like the region of Peel often find themselves on the front lines of adapting to such changes. So as the region ensures quality today, we also prepare for the future challenges. In responding to Council's guidance and priorities, we explore innovative partnerships. This includes developing strong relationships with our local communities, Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon. We also maximize the benefit of the region's investments by working with the public sector, nonprofits, and the broader public sector. For example, Peel Region Public Works launched Ontario's first Smart Freight Centre. This partnership involves 3 universities, and it's about using technology to help businesses in Peel move goods to where they need to be, but with a lower environmental impact. The region is addressing the affordable housing challenges experienced by low-income households by exploring new ways of getting houses built. One example of many is our partnership with the private sector developer Daniels Group. Acting on Council's commitment to corporate social responsibility, the region is developing solutions for sustainable procurement, waste diversion, and in planning for and mitigating climate change. We know that enabling and expanding digital tools will be essential to further improving service delivery and operating more effectively. So it is worth noting that the region's digital services team was recently recognized as a global finalist in a prestigious award for Best Enterprise and Digital Architecture. The region's finance department led a socioeconomic study into the changing nature of employment and what it can mean for municipal finances. It is informing discussions across Canada, and it helps the region to better understand how its tax base could evolve in a technology-driven economy. We strive for excellence in municipal government so that Peel's taxpayers receive value in the services we provide today and in the future. This budget adapts to changes in provincial funding so the region's finances remain strong. It reduces impacts on people from those changes so that everyone can contribute to their full potential. It mitigates tax increases through robust financial management so that taxpayers are respected. It sustains the services that help residents and businesses enjoy and build a higher quality of life. And it makes investments in people to enable their future success, building and sustaining a progress towards your vision of quality for life. I'll now invite the Chief Financial Officer to provide additional context through the budget overview presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy. But before Stephen begins, perhaps I can acknowledge a wonderful delegation that's just made their way into the chamber. Members of council, we have a delegation here from Delhi, India, who are their government administrators at the federal level and have come to learn about our best practices and maybe tell us what we can do better and learn from us what they can do better. So I had some time with them this morning, and it's a real joy to have them here. And we had a very nice brief discussion, so I welcome all of our guests from Delhi, India. Thank you for being here. Okay, and with that, we'll go right to the corporate budget overview, an oral presentation from Stephen Van Off-Wagen, Commissioner of Finance, and our Chief Financial Officer. Welcome.
Thank you, Nancy, and good morning, Chair Unica and members of Council. Joining me today is Norm Lum, our Director of Business and Financial Planning. Today, I will present an overview of the region's proposed 2020 budget. Developing this year's budget has been more difficult than any budget in the last decade. First, this year's provincial budget with funding cuts and funding adjustments have placed council in the difficult position of choosing between cutting vital services or raising property taxes. Second, an increase in gun violence continues to create growing concerns for our community safety. I believe you'll find this year's budget strikes a balance between addressing community needs and respecting property taxpayers. And I believe you will find that the proposed budget is a responsible budget. Our budget discussions will be around the services we provide and the strategic outcomes we are striving to achieve. Today, I will provide an overview of the consolidated budget with details on the operating budget, including tax-supported services and utility or water and wastewater services. I'll discuss the capital plan, as well as a summary of the budget, an overview of the outlook over the next 3 years. And finally, as Council requested on November 14th, I will outline the process to bring forward options to lower the property tax impact. As we heard on November 14, the economy and population of the region of Peel are growing. With that comes the responsibility for managing that growth. The region has a demonstrated track record of strong financial management, which positions us well to respond to a constantly changing environment. Development of the budget is guided by Peel's financial principles and is part of prudent long-term financial planning and ensures that we can provide the required programs and services now and into the future. I believe that you'll observe these qualities reflected throughout this year's budget. So I'd like to start by giving you an overview of how the proposed budget will impact the average property tax and utility rate payer. The budget proposes a net levy increase of 4.3%. Peel represents, on average, 41% of the property tax bill, resulting in a property tax impact of 1.7%. These funds are recovered through the property tax bill. The left side of the chart shows the property tax impact by municipality for homes with an assessed value of $546,000. The difference between Caledon relative to Brampton and Mississauga is primarily attributable to the changes in OPP and police services, Peel Police Services budgets. The average small business will see an increase of $148 or $12 a month. The right side of the slide summarizes the utility rate budget, which proposes a 6.3% rate increase recovered through utility bills for those on municipal water supply. This slide provides a bird's eye view of the total budget. You can see from the tabular format both the operating and capital expenditures for services provided under 3 focus areas: living, thriving, and leading. As shown in the last column, the budget proposes operating and capital investments of $3.7 billion to advance Council's current and long-term objectives. I'll explain each area separately in the following slides. Services in the area of living improve people's lives in their time of need. The operating budget totals $902 million with capital investments of $43 million. Highlights include providing paramedic response, accessible transportation trips, subsidies for lower-income families requiring childcare, affordable housing subsidies, long-term care services, and shelter and transitional housing supports. Services under Thriving ensure that our communities are integrated, safe, and complete. The operating budget totals $1.47 billion with capital investments of $982 million. Services include safe drinking water, policing services, immunization coverage for students, regional roads, residential waste collection and management, as well as the early on programs to support children and caregivers. Investments in the area of leading ensure that the region is being future-oriented and accountable. While our end focus is always on Peel's residents and businesses, these investments are vital to ensure that the resident and business-facing services can be effective. Highlights include live call center support, maintaining a high level of client satisfaction and employee engagement, modernizing service delivery, continuously improving value for the taxpayer, maintaining Peel's financial sustainability, and finally, maintaining our community infrastructure. Peel's Continuous Improvement Program is a demonstration of our commitment to delivering services that are effective and efficient. In 2019, Peel received Excellence Canada's enterprise-wide platinum-level accreditation, the only public sector organization in Canada to achieve such recognition. The Excellence Canada Review also pointed out areas where additional opportunities exist to improve customer experience and the effectiveness of operations. This assessment is being used to guide our continuous improvement efforts. As I spoke to earlier, developing this budget has been challenging. We looked across all services to find operational efficiencies and opportunities to generate additional revenues. Our approach included program evaluations, a review of service levels including childcare, paramedic services, and waste management services, line-by-line reviews of our service budgets, a comprehensive review of our user fees, and exploring alternate service delivery models such as employment services to ensure value for the taxpayer. In addition, Peel applied for provincial audit and accountability funding for childcare. Commissioner Sheehy will provide more information on the preliminary findings in her presentation. Property and utility ratepayers ultimately benefit from Peel's disciplined approach to continuous improvement. Through these efforts, the budget reflects $2.6 million in cost savings and a further $1.9 million in cost avoidance. As reported to Council, Peel's active cash management approach generated improved investment returns of $6 million in 2019. The investment returns are applied to reserves to offset Peel's long-term capital financing requirements. Over the past 4 years, the region's continuous improvement program has resulted in cumulative benefits of $56 million in tax-supported services and $23 million within the utility rate-supported services. Additionally, the budget proposes a $3 million increase in user fees. Later today, each commissioner will provide additional details on efficiencies achieved in the different services within their respective areas. Budget preparation requires an assessment of risks associated with the delivery of Peel's many services. Assumptions are reviewed and updated in consideration of the best available information and historical trends. Managed risks this year include provincial funding, changes in legislation and regulation, climate change and weather patterns, the changing nature of employment, economic market and market volatility, as well as our aging infrastructure. The budget is aligned with Peel's enterprise risk model. I'd like to highlight that Peel's property tax bill funds regional and local municipal services as well as the education system. When you, as a resident, receive your tax bill, on average, Peel services represent 41%. Local municipal services also account for 41%, with the remaining balance of the property tax bill funding the education system. The relative portions will vary by municipality. I will now provide the financial details behind the operating budget. Let's first look at the tax-supported side on the left. The tax-supported budget pressures after assessment growth results in a 4.3% net levy increase, including 1% to maintain infrastructure and 0.9% to offset provincial funding cuts. Moving to the right, the utility-supported program proposes an increase of 6.3%, including 5.3% to maintain infrastructure. The region's proposed operating budget of $2.6 billion provides funding for externally financed organizations, including 3 conservation authorities, the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, commonly known as MPAC, and police services, which includes Peel Regional Police and Ontario Provincial Police. Both police and conservation authorities have separate boards who review their budgets prior to submission to the region. These boards include representation from members of Regional Council. MPAC is funded by single-tier and upper-tier municipalities according to a formula set in legislation. Peel's operating budget has 4 main sources of funding. Non-property tax funding includes grants and subsidies, since many of Peel's services are provincially mandated and have some form of cost-sharing arrangement in place. Of note, the grants are $19 million lower than budgeted in 2019. Water and wastewater fees are recovered through the water bill. Other sources include contributions from reserves, miscellaneous user fees, development charge reserve financing, and payments in lieu of taxes. The remaining 45% of the budget is funded through property taxes. Every year, Peel services face pressure from increased cost due to inflation and population growth. Provincial funding commitments vary from year to year. As Council has heard over the last 8 months, the province has made numerous announcements impacting regional services, including funding cuts, reversal of cuts, and deferral of funding cuts. The budget reflects a $19 million reduction in funding from the province as compared to 2019. This slide outlines the approaches taken to manage the reduction of funding and the difficult decisions required of Council this year. For example, in September, Council agreed to provide discretionary cost share funding to mitigate the risk of returning to waitlisting for access to affordable childcare. Each commissioner will provide more detail on their respective services. Police Services and Conservation Authority budgets are also vulnerable to changes in funding, and they will provide an update within their presentations. Within the regionally controlled budget, labor costs represent just 27% of total expenditures. As outlined in this slide, labor costs are funded through the utility rate, by the province, and by property taxes. The remaining 73% of the budget is for non-labor costs. It includes reserve contributions to fund state of good repair for Peel's infrastructure-intensive services as outlined in the capital plan. Leveraging the private sector for efficient service delivery, including waste collection and processing and disposal, as well as water and wastewater operations. By working with our partners, reflecting Peel's role as a service manager for housing, homelessness support, and childcare, as well as providing income and employment supports. And finally, direct program delivery costs account for 26%. How services are delivered varies from service to service. As noted earlier, the private sector is leveraged to provide a variety of efficient services such as waste collection, water, and wastewater. On the other hand, services like paramedic response and Ontario Works utilize internal resources. Services are reviewed periodically, ensuring the most effective service delivery model is used. In order to meet Council's approved service levels, the 2019 column includes 9 staff positions becoming regular full-time at no additional cost to taxpayers. With respect to staff, in the area of living, most are accounted for by new paramedics, which are 50% funded by the province. Additions in the area of utility rate supported services are associated with expanding the region's water supply and wastewater services. These positions are fully funded by user fees. A detailed listing of proposed staff additions can be found in Appendix 5 of the consolidated budget. I'll now provide details or an overview of the changes to Peel's tax-supported operating budget. It is important to understand how Peel's proposed budget increase compares to inflation. Many of Peel's services are enabled by infrastructure. To fund an ongoing state of good repair, the operating budget includes 1% net levy increase to capital reserve contributions. The 2019 residential construction index is 4.6%. Base operating increases are lower than CPI. Like the average homeowner or business, Peel too must raise revenues or find efficiencies to offset inflation pressures. As mentioned previously, Peel continues to strive to demonstrate our commitment to respecting the taxpayer through sound financial management. Development of this year's budget faced several challenges. First, Peel Police budget reflects their response to the increase in gun violence, which has created growing concerns for community safety. Second, the budget reflects the impact of provincial funding cuts. And lastly, as reported to Council on November 14, assessment growth reported by MPAC is at its lowest level in Peel's history. These factors collectively have put significant pressure on the tax levy. Now let me explain in more detail how we arrived at the proposed net levy increase of 4.3%. To maintain existing service levels with a community growing by 20,000 people per year, a base increase net of assessment growth is 2.4%. The base increase includes 1% to sustain a state of good repair, and 1.4% is required to maintain services for inflation and population growth. Better than expected revenue from payments in lieu of taxes and tax appeals, plus savings from Peel's continuous improvement programs, help to contain the overall base increase and offset reduction from lower assessment growth. During 2019, Council recommended a number of priorities be included in the budget, such as funding for community hubs, extending the butterfly model to Tall Pines, and implementing the next phase, or expansion phase of Early On program. In total, the budget includes $4.2 million with a net levy impact of 0.4% to address these priorities. In 2018, the Police Services Board directed the Chief to bring forward its budget requirements to enable effective policing for increased community safety. The budget includes additional resources to address community safety with an impact of 0.6% on the net levy. And finally, as mentioned earlier, the budget includes funding approved by Council to maintain core service levels impacted by cuts in provincial funding. The impact is $9.2 million, and this does include an impact in police services, or 0.9%, bringing the total proposed net increase to 4.3%. The tax-supported budget has total operating increases of $55.2 million, which includes regionally controlled programs and our external agencies. The increase, as shown in the right column, can be broken down by extending service levels to a growing population, offset by savings from Peel's continuous improvement program, investments in service level improvements, an increase in reserve contribution to maintain Peel's growing and aging infrastructure, and finally, provincial funding cuts to be financed by the property tax. I will address the regionally controlled service investments over the next few slides. On this slide, I would like to highlight new investments to improve people's lives in their time of need, maintaining paramedic response times and patient outcomes while responding to additional 911 calls, more accessible transportation rides so residents can move barrier-free, supporting low-income residents with subsidies for affordable transit trips, implementing the butterfly household model at Tall Pines, and mitigating the risk of provincial funding cuts on childcare. New investments in the area of thriving area of services are designed to ensure that we have integrated, safe, and complete communities. Investments include expanding the early on services, enhancing services to address workload associated with complex site plans, advancing Peel's waste diversion goals, and providing waste collection services to new households. New investments in the area of leading are required to enable direct service delivery areas and community for life outcomes. Highlights include implementing sustainable procurement, funding over the next 4 years to support the development of community hubs, and an increase in reserve contribution to maintain Peel's growing and aging infrastructure. The new investments are offset by a reduction in tax support of utility programs as we move this program to full cost recovery. Later today, my colleagues will provide more details on key service investments. Having now reviewed all of the budget increases on the left side, we will now focus on the funding sources presented on the right. After applying tax assessment growth to the increased investments, the remaining gap of $46.5 million is funded through an average property tax increase of 1.7%. This chart outlines where your regional tax dollars will be spent for each $100,000 in residential assessment. The orange bars at the top represent the external agencies, while the blue bars represent all other regional services. The change per $100,000 in assessment is $15.23. This slide illustrates the impact on Peel's net levy increase for a variety of housing types in each local municipality. As noted earlier, the lower impact for Caledon is primarily due to the difference in OPP versus Peel Regional Police budgets. I'll now provide an overview of Peel's utility rate supported budget. As Peel continues to grow, we will provide water and wastewater services to over 4,000 new residential and business customers. The budget includes funding to provide services to these new customers, as well as pay for inflation on labor, goods, and services, partially offset by savings from Peel's continuous improvement program, as well as some new service investments. And it includes an increase in reserve contribution to maintain a state of good repair. Peel's supply of water and wastewater is infrastructure intensive. I will speak to the capital infrastructure requirements in the following slides. Total program pressures of just over $30 million results in an overall utility rate increase of 6.3%. The utility rate services are required to be fully cost recovered through the water bill, which is a user fee based on consumption. Based on the proposed budget, a typical household will see an increase of 13 cents per day. A small business will see an increase of 33 cents per day. Peel's average residential water bill is very competitive compared to that of our neighboring municipalities. Peel's 2020 water bill will be 37% below the 2019 average within the GTA. An explanation of this year's increase will be provided to customers following the increase scheduled for April 1st. To ensure that Peel's water and wastewater infrastructure is maintained over the long term, we are forecasting an average annual increase of 6.8% over the next 2 years. At $845 in 2022, the cost of Peel's water and wastewater services will still be far below the 2019 rates of our neighboring municipalities. A review of the water and wastewater financing model will be initiated in 2020 with a focus on improving the overall long-term sustainability of our utility rate program. I will now provide more information on the proposed capital budget. Similar to our operating budget, Peel's capital budget is developed keeping in mind Peel's financial principles. Every year, in addition to the one-year capital budget, the region provides a 9-year capital forecast, which is approved by council in principle. Planning beyond a single year allows the region to assess the sustainability of our future plans. The capital plan will be the first to include infrastructure requirements to address 2041 planning horizon, as well as council's new housing master plan. The capital plan, at approximately $9.4 billion, supports regionally controlled tax-supported services, Conservation Authority managed projects, police services, and our utility rate supported services. The capital plan includes investments to maintain existing infrastructure and to add new infrastructure to support population and employment growth. As noted on the right side of the chart, the capital plan is primarily funded from internal reserves and development charges. The capital plan for regionally controlled services identifies priority investments totaling $8.9 billion. $1.2 billion to fund Peel's affordable housing, master plan, paramedic services, and long-term care. $7.5 billion to fund infrastructure-intensive services, such as water supply, wastewater, roads, and waste management. And funding in the area of leading to support investments in enabling technology and maintaining our office facilities. Peel's capital plan is financed primarily through existing capital reserves and development charge revenues. Debt financing totaling $240 million has been identified for revenue-generating projects such as our affordable housing and investments to enable Peel's waste diversion goals, better reflecting generational equity for the utilization of these assets. We employ financial management principles in our capital planning. First, assets should be maintained in a state of good repair. Second, growth pays for growth to the extent possible under our current legislation. Third, the capital plan needs to be sustainable. Non-DC growth and other council priorities are included where capital and future operating costs are sustainable and affordable. The regionally controlled capital plan includes works associated with maintaining a state of good repair. DC funded growth to support population and employment growth to 2041, and non-DC growth funded capital and council priorities. I'll now provide more details on the policy directions which support the capital plan investments described on this slide. Financing Peel's capital plan is multifaceted and supports the financial principle of ensuring the capital plan is sustainable. Financing Peel's state of good repair follows the philosophy of pay-as-we-go, using available reserves funded through the infrastructure levy. An update on the status of reserves was provided to Council on November 14. In order to support the capital budget and meet long-term needs, we need to increase tax-supported reserve contributions by the equivalent of 1% net levy increase this year and in each of the next 6 years. The tax-supported infrastructure levy supports capital works, such as maintaining and adding to Peel's affordable housing stock, regional roads, paramedics, and long-term care facilities. Also on November 14, Council received an update on the financing needs for maintaining Peel's water and wastewater infrastructure over the next 20 years. In order to maintain a state of good repair, the budget includes an infrastructure levy in the utility rate by 5% this year and 5% in each of the next 2 years. I would like to explain a little bit more why it is important to increase these infrastructure levies. With this increase in funding, Peel will have adequate funding or adequate matching dollars to leverage provincial and federal funding. We'll have an enhanced flexibility to manage unanticipated capital requirements, be better positioned to sustain capital projects in 2020 and beyond, and to manage risks associated with our credit rating. In advance of future budgets, staff will assess and report back to Council on the adequacy of our reserves, taking into account developments in federal and provincial funding. Debt is an important part of our comprehensive capital financing strategy. Council's support of long-term financial planning and growth management has improved Peel's financial flexibility over the past 6 years. As illustrated, Peel's current and future borrowing capacity is currently within the provincial annual repayment limits. The increase in debt requirements to 2029 reflects financing required to support the Affordable Housing Master Plan, the Long-Term Waste Management Plan, and infrastructure servicing to support growth to 2041. The majority of Peel's outstanding debt is required to support growth-related infrastructure ahead of collection of development charge revenue. Development charge-related debt financing costs are fully recovered through the development charges. The issuance of additional DC debt may be required in 2020. Peel's debt financing requirements form part of the annual credit rating agency assessment. Once the implications of Bill 108 are better understood, staff will bring forward an updated capital financing strategy to Council. Staff will seek Council approval prior to issuing any additional debt. The capital budget represents the portion of the 10-year capital plan for which Council is being asked to approve. At $1.1 billion, the capital budget includes regionally controlled tax-supported services, Conservation Authority managed projects, police services, and utility rate supported services. As noted on the right side of the chart, the capital budget is primarily funded from internal reserves and development charges. Within each service, the capital budget supports maintaining a state of good repair, DC-funded growth capital to support growth, and non-DC funded capital to manage growth not covered by DC legislation and council priority investments. Some of these projects are not new projects, but represent the next phase of funding for existing projects as they advance through the stages of completion. More detail on the capital budget will be included in each of the Commissioner and Police presentations. In summary, the capital budget proposes investments to enable the delivery of our services including investments to ensure that people's lives are improved in their time of need, which includes affordable housing, paramedic ambulances, community hubs, accessible transportation, and long-term care. Investments in the area to ensure communities are integrated, safe, and complete, which includes water supply, wastewater, waste diversion, and to keep people and goods moving on the regional roads network. And finally, investments to modernize the region's technology and maintain our office facilities. I'll now provide a summary of the 2020 budget. As I mentioned at the start of my presentation, this is the most challenging budget for Council's consideration in over a decade. The budget proposes a net levy increase of 4.3%. The net levy increase is a result of protecting vital services from provincial funding cuts, investments to improve community safety, investments in council priority services such as Butterfly and community hubs, and investments to maintain infrastructure and existing services for a growing population. Peel's 2020 residential water bill will be 37% below that of our neighboring municipalities. By focusing on the bottom line impact to the average residential tax bill, Council can ensure that the overall increase remains affordable. The next 3 slides will show how Council decisions on local and regional budgets are provided under 3 different scenarios. Starting with Brampton, the impact of a 4.3% regional net levy increase is 1.5% on the total property tax bill. For the education portion, we assume no change. With respect to the local municipal portion, we look at the impact of a net levy increase ranging from 2 to 6%. When combined with Peel's proposed increase, the overall average residential tax rate increase ranges from 2.4 to 4.2%. For the town of Caledon, after adjusting for the impact of OPP budget changes, the region's proposed net levy increase has a property tax impact of 0.8%. When combined with Peel's proposed increase, the overall average residential tax rate increase ranges from 1.7 to 3.6%. For Mississauga, the impact of the region's net levy increase is 2.1% on the total property tax bill. When combined with Peel's proposed increase, the overall average residential tax increase ranges from 2.8 to 4.2%. From year to year, the level of service pressures may vary from one tier of municipal government to another. But by focusing on the bottom line impact, Council can ensure that there is a balance between meeting community needs and taxpayer affordability. While Council must make difficult decisions to strike a balance between community need and taxpayer affordability, the region does offer relief to those less fortunate. Peel services such as long-term care, affordable housing, childcare, and Ontario Works are designed to support Peel's most vulnerable populations. The budget also supports low-income individuals with subsidies to make transit more affordable in Brampton and Mississauga. We provide homelessness supports and low-income seniors dental services. Finally, Peel partners with our local municipalities through property tax rebates of up to $490 for low-income seniors and those on ODSP. I'll now provide an update on the budget forecast for the next 3 years. It is important that we look beyond the current year to ensure that decisions made today will be sustainable and affordable in the future. The forecast is based on a growing population, inflation trends, and council-approved service levels. 2021 and 2022 reflect the... Oh, did I exceed my time? I'm almost done. 2021 and 2022 reflect the impact of continued provincial funding changes as we understand them today. Typically, at this time, I would recommend a budget target for 2021. However, I believe it would be appropriate for Council to wait for the release of the next provincial budget. Once we understand its impact on Peel services, I'll bring forward a 2021 budget target recommendation for Council's consideration. As noted on November 14, Regional Council directed staff to bring forward options to lower the property tax impact to no greater than 1.5%. The region's net levy funds both regionally controlled services and external agencies. The table on this slide highlights the minimum reduction required of each organization to fund Peel's net levy and respect Council's direction. In bringing forward options to lower the property tax impact, staff will be guided by the principles shown on this slide, including protecting and maintaining service levels, ensuring long-term sustainability, maintaining taxpayer fairness, and leveraging our continuous improvement efforts. Once we better understand the contributions of the external agencies, which we'll hear next week, we will bring forward a series of options for Council's consideration on December 12. Options to lower the property tax impact may include incorporating the latest information on tax assessment growth, ending the property tax support for the utility rate, extending the phase-in period to raise funds to support the development of community hubs, revisiting Council decisions to substitute lower provincial funding with an increase in property taxes, and options presented by our property tax financed external agencies. Next, my colleagues will present the proposed service budgets for which they are responsible. On December 5, we will hear from the remaining Peel Regional Services, Peel Regional Police, Ontario Provincial Police, and the Conservation Authorities. On December 12, Council will consider options to lower the property tax impact. December 19th has been set aside for continued budget deliberations. Thank you very much, and this concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Sado. Do you have a question at this time? Go ahead.
Just a few clarifications here. First of all, I think it's very confusing for citizens to see 1.7 on property tax increase, particularly in the report, in the largest print you could possibly think of, when Mississauga's increase is 2.1, Brampton's is 1.5, and Caledon's is 0.8. I find that very confusing, and I know our citizens do as well. So I think going forward, if we're going to be putting out information on what the actual proposed tax increase is, then let's be very upfront about it and make it very clear that each municipality does not, no municipality actually has 1.7. So using that number, I think, is extremely confusing. Could you explain what drives the difference between the Brampton tax increase of 1.5 and the Mississauga tax increase of 2.1?
Thank you for the question. The primary difference that really drives it is if you look at the total tax bill in Mississauga for a house assessed at $545,000, it's about $4,375 today. If you look at in Brampton, it's $5,408 today.
Doesn't make any sense.
So when you apply the increase of the dollars required for the region to collect, the increase is bigger because Mississauga has a much lower tax bill today than Brampton does.
That really doesn't make any sense at all. I'm sorry. I've been sitting at this table for 28 years doing regional budgets, and I've never heard an explanation like that
Norm is
because our
prepared to add
tax
to
bill's
that.
lower.
So through the chair, really, when you look at the difference, so both Brampton and Mississauga have the same increase from the region. What really separates the two rates is the relative assessment growth within the two municipalities. So in Mississauga, I think they have assessment growth of 0.5%. And in Brampton, the assumption in the initial stages of the budget was 1.25%. So that 0.7 difference is basically the difference between the two rates.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. No offense, Steve.
There's a reason why Norm's sitting here.
Good. Good thing. Okay, I'm very pleased to see that the numbers that we're showing under the construction index, because I think that I'm amazed that it's 4.6 right now. It's always been high, but I always tell my residents that we really should be looking more at the construction index, because that's what drives more of our capital costs, both at the city and the region. And that's the number we should strive to be under more than CPI, because I think it has a lesser impact on our budgets, maybe not on the residential, on the residents themselves. With regard to the police budget, and this is kind of a generic question here, you're showing 457 million or 5% capital included in our capital long-term. So last year, when the police were here, I asked the question, all of the capital assets that Peel Regional Police have, buildings, belong to the region of Peel? And I was given the answer, yes. So at that time, I raised my concern that we are not, as a council, we're paying for it out of the tax. So we're collecting taxes for it. We own the buildings. But when it comes to construction and approvals of what is being built, it does not come to regional council, and we don't oversee the projects. So the former CAO had told me at the time that he was working on changing that to give the region more control over assets that are public assets owned by the region of Peel, not by Peel Regional Police. So what's happening on that front?
So thank you for the question. We have, and there's a report at council at the last meeting on our asset management program. So we've initiated work collaborating with Peel Police on bringing their assets into the asset management program to make sure that they're being maintained to the right service levels. We're also working through the Police Services Board. So that work is ongoing. We need to do this actually to comply with asset management legislation by 2023.
Right.
And that work is well underway of working with, bringing them into the same process as we manage the Region Peel assets. Decision-making on assets
That's-
is limited
yeah.
to the Police Services Act. I believe, and my solicitor is behind me, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to real property acquisition or disposal, that is a decision of council, but the operations of what those assets are utilized would be a Police Services Board discussion.
So I realize the operation is, but, and bringing them in is one thing. But as we're moving forward, we're looking at a $457 million expenditure down the road. So how are we controlling that directly as a region? Because we will be paying to build them. We should have some control over what is built.
So I think the starting point would be, we have representatives of council on the board.
That,
can-
yeah, I realize that,
Regional
but I'm not
council on its own,
asking that.
but maybe our solicitor can come down and give the specifics on authority around police budgets.
I don't really have much to add to what has already been identified. I think it has been outlined. The ownership is, as you say, with the region. The elements of constructing facilities are typically viewed as having operational aspects, and the operational aspect is controlled at the police side.
Okay, I would like to see if we are putting 557 million in our long-term budget, that's 5% of our capital. I would like to see us as council having more control of approvals over that budget. So when the police bring their budget next week, I would like to have that outlined, and I'd like to have it broken out, that when we would be getting approvals of it, because, you know, we can't just keep approving, letting an outside board, albeit we have a couple of members of council on the board, that, none of which I think are here right now, except for Nando. So, but the point is that the region of Peel owns those assets, and the region of Peel should have more control over what is built, as we do with any other asset, housing, whatever. So I would like to see something coming forward on that.
And we can certainly pass that request on to police staff so they're aware of the questions coming.
Okay, if you could, thank you. I am disappointed with the increase that's going to be coming forward in the police budget for 35 officers, but I'll ask that question next week. With the utility rate, we need to get a better handle on smoothing those utility rate increases going forward. Over the years, we have had, you know, I think if you did a chart over the last 10 or 15 years, the utility rate would be going like this. And we just have not been really consistent. There were years that we reduced the rate. There were years we had 0. And then a year later, we skyrocketed it to 7 or 8%. And the reason for that was that water conservation was so successful that we had to raise the rates. It's very hard to explain to residents that you're conserving water, you're using much less water, and your rate is going up. And the reason we were given by staff is because the water usage was down, we were getting less money. We were getting less revenue at the region. And I always recall that budget year where staff came forward with 6 or 7% increase, and that was the reason for it. It was very clearly stated that we needed more revenue, and it was just too successful, which is, it's really hard to explain to residents that. But what are we doing to try and smooth going forward so that we don't have these spike years?
So we have a project that's been initiated to look at the long-term sustainability of the program. One of the things that a number of municipalities have done is set a fixed rate increase for a period of 5 years or even 10 years. I think in York Region it was 10 years. Now, the rate increase in York was even more than what we're looking at, but trying to find out how do we smooth it out, how do we ensure that long-term sustainability. Yeah. One of our biggest challenges right now is the infrastructure that was originally put in was funded by the province.
Right.
Now that we're replacing and maintaining it, it has to be funded fully by the consumption rate. So that's a big driver for the infrastructure levy component. But we have a project team that's been developed to look at not only that long-term sustainability, but fairness in the billing system. Because right now we're a completely volumetric billing system. And certainly Andrew, over the next year, will be bringing forward reports to council on that longer-term plan.
Okay, my final question. If there's a motion from the City of Mississauga that's on today for receipt and referral, but if the City of Mississauga was on the same payment for police services, Peel Regional Police Services, as Caledon is, what would the difference be in the tax increase?
I'm not sure I can answer that question. I think at its heart, in Caledon, the OPP deliver both provincial and municipal policing services. The municipal policing services are funded through Caledon on a weighted assessment basis. Within Peel, our police services provide municipal policing services, and services to the airport. That's sort of a comparison. These services to the airport are fully funded by
Right.
the airport, and the balance of service, the municipal policing costs, are funded by weighted assessment, similar to Caledon.
Okay, I understood Caledon was funded differently on, for police services, but perhaps when we get to the correspondence and we refer the information, you can get that information and bring it back then to a future budget meeting so that we can deal with it at budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rass.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Stephen. The 1% infrastructure fee or levy, how long have we had that in place now?
I believe the first year that it came forward to council was in 2008.
Okay.
After a series of reports with respect to it. Most municipalities dealing with growing their understanding of the long-term risk associated with infrastructure funding at State of Good Repair for the infrastructure. Again, similar to the water wastewater, where in the old days, a lot of the infrastructure is funded by senior levels of the government. That doesn't happen to the same extent anymore, and we've seen that growing concern over the past decade. We haven't nipped and gotten to the end of it, but it's been in place since 2008.
And this suggests that it is going to be in place for at least another 6 years.
Right, so right now it includes the acknowledgement that we have a housing master plan that so it's funding not only the State of Good Repair, but as council approves some additional investments, like the Seniors Health and Wellness Village replacement, our paramedic facility program, where we built out the reporting stations and the satellite stations, and some of the other services. So it's both the State of Good Repair and addressing those expanding services within the community.
Okay, so for the next 6 years, I think this would, I'm just looking ahead here, this would probably be in place for longer than the 6-year period, correct? Because our infrastructure is just continuing to age.
We do data analysis every year. We do full life cycle costing, and based on that full life cycle costing, I mean, the other piece that does get caught up in this is the development charge legislation doesn't cover the full cost of growth. So this 1% contributes to that component as well. But we do an updated life cycle based on the data we have today, and our data is getting better and better. And we do have a capital project for some technology enhancements around asset management to get better and richer data. And as that happens, we get better information. But the big driver and change between last year and this year, so the 20-year funding gap right now is $1.8 billion on the tax-supported side. It really is, we've got the data now on Peel Housing Corp, on the State of Good Repair requirements for that, and the Housing Master Plan.
Okay. And I will just echo the comments from Councillor Seda regarding our utility rates. We do need a better way to smooth them out. I've had 4 resident association AGMs in the last 2 weeks. And clearly, when I presented the budget as presented, nobody was happy with it. And we certainly need to do a better job at sharpening the pencil. So I was encouraged to see that you're bringing back some additional plans at the next steps and through the conversations over the next couple of weeks. But I will say on the utility rate, we need to, I think, move on this sooner rather than later to move to a fixed and variable utility rate charge. That's something I think I've been advocating for a long time because it's been a long time coming. Okay, those are my questions for now, and I'll wait for the presentations. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Parrish.
Yes, I just want to pick up where Councillor Sato left off. When I look at the way the rates translate, particularly between Brampton and Mississauga, it's a bit concerning. The motion or the reports for receipt at the back of the binder today have been at the whole police services costs and how it's distributed to Brampton and Mississauga has been studied extensively through the Ernst & Young report and through our city staff. And the big difference is, despite what you just said earlier, is in Caledon, the OPP, as it does with 300 other municipalities in Ontario, they base their fees of 50% on assessment and 50% on number of calls and complexity of calls. 300 municipalities do it that way over Ontario. We don't do it that way in the region of Peel. Or in Peel Regional Police, we base it strictly on assessment. So that's why we have brought forward that report at the back, and we're hoping that the staff here will take some time, because you all signed off on the Ernst & Young report, so nobody disagreed with what was in it, that they have a look at it. For the next budget meeting, and maybe for the police budget meeting, I would like you to do the calculations. Maybe Norm is sitting here and he's writing madly. Show me the difference on page 55 and 54 if we do our police services board the way the OPP does it, and see what difference it will make on the Brampton taxes for houses and businesses, and the difference it would make on ours. That's before we even touch the budget. The second thing, I think the one pager in there on page 59, in response to Councillor Demurla's motion and Councillor Brown's seconding of reducing it to 1.5, is a token one pager. It doesn't say anything. It just says Peel Regional Police have to go down to 2.18. The other thing is, we can't touch the police board. We can send it back. And one of the reasons I think, and I think the 2 police services board or 3 police services board people who are here, Mayor Crombie, could explain that one of the features of the new chief was he has been on the record as saying, you don't just throw police at things, you don't hire more police, you redeploy police. I don't know how we could be passing a budget when he's been on the job less than 60 days. That's his theory and attitude. And this is an old budget designed by a previous interim police chief. So I think it's a good heads up to make sure the police chief knows before he comes to see us that the questions I'm going to be asking are, if you believe in redeploying services, why are we looking at almost 6% increase when you haven't even had 90 days to go over the way we deploy police services now? So this whole thing is a huge impact on the budget. And I understand everybody says don't touch the police, leave them alone. We're all a little bit afraid of them, I think. And we've got a new chief. I've met him 3 times. He's very innovative, very exciting, very new. There is absolutely nothing with suggesting they go back and take it down to 2.18 and give him a year to get his feet into the process, because I have a lot of faith in him from my meetings with him. So that message should go back. And maybe Norm could do page 54 and 55 using the formula that Mississauga is recommending.
Just with respect to, I don't think we'll be able to have that done because we don't have access to the police data. It's not on the public record. So we can certainly reach out to the police in terms of the process. But at this stage of the game, I can't imagine that we would have the data and the ability to apply the OPP model in time for next week. We
had the data for the Ernst & Young report. It's there. It's available in that report. That's how we came up with it at Mississauga. That's how our staff did it.
And Ernst & Young used about 25 staff working 24 hours a day.
But just take their
and took some
numbers.
modeling. Well, yeah, but those are assumptions. I don't have the underlying data, so I wouldn't want to put in front of council the underlying, without having access to the model that they used in the underlying data. I think if we're going to do this, we really do need to do it properly, using the proper data from police based on where their calls are today. That would have used outdated information. It wouldn't be the data that we would use going forward should council choose to look at other options other than the weighted assessment.
Well, we've been told that the report here is just for receipt, so when it comes up for receipt, we are going to refer it to staff, I'm sure, to do a thorough review. But I think a good starting point would be the Ernst & Young report, where I think the stats are pretty fresh.
Well, and the Ernst & Young report is on the public communications, so I mean, you certainly have that as the starting point for your
That's what
discussion.
we used in Mississauga. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Raz?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Stephen, just one point of clarification I forgot to ask earlier. Our infrastructure levy, is it at 1% or are we increasing it by 1% to be 2%?
We are increasing the reserve contributions, the equivalent of 1% of the net levy, so by $10.4 million. And then next year, the intent would be that we'd raise it another 1%, or the equivalent of probably by that time about $10.5 million. So it's an incremental increase over and above the existing contributions.
Okay.
Does that
Thanks.
make sense?
No, but I'll figure it out. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Demirla.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I just, because I'm new to the process, and I know that the speakers before me have sort of, perhaps canvassed ideas around what could be done to sharpen the budget some. But I just wanted to know, given the motion that was passed last week, how does that flow? Like, when would you come back with some options on a more sharpened budget?
Certainly. So on slide 60, I outlined sort of the decision-making principles that staff are using to bring forward options on December 12th. We haven't seen what the external agencies will deliver yet, and whether council thinks what they propose as reductions being acceptable. So once we have their information on next Thursday, we will come back to council with that information, plus the kinds of options that we outlined on slide 61 around there might be some additional tax assessment growth as we got the latest information. We do currently still have some funding that is a subsidy to the water rate program, which is a consumption base, so property taxes are supporting the water rate. Extending the phase-in for funding for community hubs. Council, the ability to maybe look back at the decisions, and Nancy outlined a whole bunch of decisions that council made over the past year in dealing with the provincial funding adjustments. So we bring those kinds of things back and provide the risk and the analysis that goes behind it. Right now, these are just the ideas that we're currently considering to bring back. I believe that when all of this comes back, the amount will be greater than the 5.6 million shown on the slide that would get us to 1.5.
Okay, Councillor, is that good? Thank you. Councillor Sado.
Thank you. Sorry, so that I don't have to go hunting here. If we had not had the provincial cuts, if everything had been status quo, what would we be looking at for a tax increase?
On slide 51, and Norm, maybe just go to that.
Sorry, 51?
51 has sort of the summary. So there's a 0.9% tax impact right now. It's about $9.2 million. That
Okay, 0.9.
we've absorbed much more in the services. So in theory, we should have gotten assumed inflation and growth funding next year for all of our services, plus in 2019. So we didn't get anywhere near the inflationary or growth funding this year or next year. For 2 years, that's a combined $24 million. So some of the services, and Nancy talked about it in childcare, we've made some adjustments to service levels, are impacted by it. But from a property tax impact, right now it's the 0.9%. So we would, in effect, be at 3.4% if it wasn't for the funding reductions by the province.
So that 3.4 would
And that would still
equate,
include
what would
inflation.
that be? I mean, I'm looking at for the city of Mississauga because those are the residents that are going to ask me. So just help me so I don't have to do the math.
I'm going to look to Norm. Or
Yeah, look to Norm.
who has
So if it
the
was
calculator going.
3.4, what would the impact be on the Mississauga tax bill? Okay.
So if you have another question, he'll.
If you
provide
want
that.
to, if you want to do that and then come back to me while
Yeah, we'll come
somebody
back-
else is
we'll get back
asking,
to you for sure.
that'd be great.
Thank you, Councillor Palashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to build off of kind of what Councillor Parrish was saying, and, you know, from an outsider looking in, when we talk about our police services, and slide 32 or page 32 is an extremely powerful slide, but as an outsider looking in, it tends to look like our police in the past and up till now, it's kind of treating the Region of Peel like the Oprah Winfrey Show, where we're just throwing police at everything. That being said, you know, when the police chief comes next week, I believe, I think he's, you know, we sure have full confidence in, you know, his ability to, I guess, put his money where his mouth is in terms of, you know, the innovation and everything that he feels like he can do and make changes to policing in the region. My question around in the city of Brampton, we've undertaken some things where it's pushed our budget back a little bit. Does that have any effect, or what effect does that have with the regional budget?
Thank you for the question. I don't see it having an impact on the region's budget, other than your decision-making. If you don't know what your numbers are in Brampton. It makes it maybe a little bit more difficult for you as a regional councillor to decide on the regional budget. I don't know what level of intelligence you have in terms of what Brampton is looking at. So there is some benefit to having both being done at the same time, but at the end of the day, it doesn't slow down your decision-making on the regional budget.
And in terms of at the regional level and in relation to staff, any conflicts or issues that you perceive?
Not from our ability to work with city staff in terms of the tax bill that goes out, because we don't set the final levy until April, and I believe your process now is scheduled for around February, so that's lots of time to get the tax levy and tax bills done in time to meet the requirements.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Steve.
Councillor Fonseca.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Stephen and Norm, for the presentation. So a couple of things. One, I echo what Councillor Sato and Councillor Ross were saying about the utility rate. But for clarification, you are not able to bring back anything to impact this budget with regards to a fixed or variable rate, correct? That would be something that...
That would be a significant council policy decision to make.
Okay.
Because in changing and improving the fairness of the system, there will be constituents that are not as well off as others that may benefit from a change in the system. So that would be a pretty significant council policy decision to make. So I would imagine, looking at Andrew, maybe for 2021, or are we thinking 2022?
Thanks, Steve. And I'll get to it a little bit more in my presentation. We're looking to bring it back for the 2022 budget to give us time to do public consultation, really flesh it out.
There would be this would obviously not be the appropriate time to bring, it would more be about direction to bring back more information, and we expect a report that you will be bringing back on
That's
that.
correct.
Okay, so there's that. And then to Councillor Demurla's point and slide, I guess it's 60, with proposed options to bring down the rate to 1.5%. Do you need a specific motion on these items, or are you just going to bring them back for December 12th?
Right now, we don't need a specific motion. All of the ones that are listed on slide 61 will be brought back to council. If there is something additional that council wishes for us to bring back, we'd be more than happy to look at those things as well. Again, what we put on the list are things that are in consideration of the principles that are outlined in the presentation as well.
Okay, so that's good. So I guess through direction then, could you provide prior to December 12th some additional information on each one of these bullets prior to December 12th so we can have, update to the tax assessment seems pretty self-explanatory, but perhaps end tax subsidy of water, wastewater services, a little bit more detail on implications, as well as the revisiting funding 9.2 million of the provincial shortfall. Like, for example, you referenced, or there's a reference to, and I'm sure it'll come in the presentation around, right now we do not have a wait list. So we've covered the provincial shortfall to ensure that we don't have a wait list, but we don't know for sure at what tipping point we will have a wait list. Is that correct? So
I think that would be correct. What council endorsed was the $5.2 million to ensure no wait listing, but we'll bring back information on the 12th, and we'll, just to your first point, we will get the information out with the agenda. Our challenge will be, and what we might do is separate out what we can do on the regions piece, because we won't have the external agencies until the 5th, and so that would have to go out on the additional agenda.
okay, so if we could possibly get a little bit more detail on each of the items here,
Absolutely.
understanding
I envision a couple
prior
slides
to
per
December
region.
12th.
Yeah.
But prior, so we could
Yes.
look at it?
Absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sheehy, on that point.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. The information that we previously provided to council was that without that $5.2 million investment, we would have a waiting list of 1,000 families and 1,100 for special needs, but we are doing more analysis on that.
Okay, so without the 5.2, but at what point would there be, my understanding is we don't know for sure about where there potentially could be a wait list. Like perhaps that number, instead of being 5.2 million, may be 2 million, or 1.7 million, or 1.5?
So through the chair, I understand your question. It's a sort of a question about sensitivity analysis, and that is what we're looking at right now. Where does it tip us over into a waiting list situation? We're doing that work.
You know, and the other thing, there may be some creative ways of phasing in that discretionary funding and still protecting the outcome of not impacting the service levels. And we bring those kind of discussions points to Council on the 12th. Because I appreciate Council's quite proud of the fact that in Peel we did get rid of the wait list and not wanting to go back to having a wait list.
Councillor Fonseca, that's it? Thank you. Not on the list, but Councillor Sato had a question pending for Norm. I thought we were going to get one last snippet. Norm, if you were able to, I think, was I right, not Councillor Sato? You were asking for something that I thought Norm was working on. Yeah. Norm, can you help us out?
Yeah, I think my rough estimate is that it would drop from 2.1 to 1.7 if we had no provincial, to 1.7, yeah.
For Mississauga residents.
For Mississauga residents.
Okay. Very good discussion. Thank you very much. Stephen, thank you for your presentation. I now go to, we have a couple of reports, 6.1 and 6.2, information that's coming back, but the clerk suggests that those two items should be folded back into their appropriate departments and they'll be dealt with within their individual budgets, unless anybody wanted to deal with affordable transit at this time. Just, it's the appropriate thing to do to deal with them when they're in their own budgets, if everybody's good with that. Okay, very good. So moving on now, we're on to regionally controlled service presentations. And before Kathy Granger speaks, I just thought one word from the chair. I think this has been a marvelous discussion so far, and I think council is asking all the right questions of what needs to go back, and we need more data. And that's why we're here to set the tone for what's coming forward. Anybody who slices it, it's going to be a very, very tough budget. So I'm proud to say that I guess we all have a responsibility to do something. So every quarter I meet with staff with regards to my budget, and I wanted you to know I'm very proud to learn from our staff that my budget relative to a year ago is $200,000 less. So this year, yeah, I didn't renovate. Thanks, Bonnie. I sort of took everything. I sort of took everything that I had and was happy. Though staff did change my office around a bit, but we took it from all existing furniture. But what I really want to do is thank the staff in my office, because I started with a complement of 4. That's what I inherited, but we got it down to 3. So I do want to thank James, Victoria, and Charmaine, because the 3 that do the work that 4 did before saved us $50,000. Then it also took some time to bring them on, and the gapping saved another $50,000, and that's 100. And I want you all to know today, one thing that was pending for the other 100,000 staff was waiting on me to do a newsletter. And I thought about it more and more, and I thought about it more, and I wanted to wait till the governance issue was sorted out. And I said, you know, I don't have 100,000 good reasons to send a newsletter out to every person in Peel. I'd rather save them the $100,000. And I thought if that makes sense this year, it makes sense for every year that I'm the chair. So I'm announcing today I'll never do a newsletter, and that's a permanent $400,000 saving to taxpayers, because I think we all have to do our share. So with thanks to the staff for the first 100,000, another 400,000 that I think should be saved, because I don't think they'll miss it on the Christmas table, and that's $500,000 that's come out of my budget over the term of my administration, and I hope it demonstrates we all have to do our share. I'm hoping nobody objects to that vehemently. I'm sure the 1.5 million taxpayers can live without my newsletter and would welcome putting $400,000 back in their pockets. So I hope that gets us off on a good tone. With that, we move to item 7.1, presentation by Kathy Granger, Acting Commissioner of Health Services.
So good morning, Chair Anika and members of Regional Council. I'm Kathy Granger, Acting Commissioner of Health Services, and you know Norm Lum, who is going to be my finance partner for this presentation. I'm pleased to be the first commissioner to present detailed budgets to you. I will be highlighting 5 services that protect and improve the health in Peel. 3 of these services fall within our strategic mandate for living. The other 2, the ones that are part of public health, fall within our thriving mandate. In past budget presentations, pressures and continuous quality improvements would have been presented to you in each individual service. This year, we have put the pressures into a single slide to make it easier to see the big picture. In late September, Council directed staff to build the provincial funding changes to long-term care and public health into the 2020 budget recommendations. This includes the news that Peel Public Health received increased base funding for the Ontario Seniors Dental Program. The public health cost share to a 70-30 ratio does not impact 2020 because Peel already funds more than the 30% of the budget. But further changes to a 60-40 ratio, if introduced, need to be addressed in outlook years. Future budget pressures are significant in all service areas. Some of the funding changes postponed by the province come into the effect in the middle of 2020, and others are deferred into 2021. And while paramedics services received an increase in base funding, that funding no longer includes an adjustment for inflation. As Steve referenced in his presentation, this means there is now a one-year lag in provincial funding for both growth and inflation going forward. Health services, like the other departments that will follow, have used a combination of service, line by line, and user fees reviews to make sure Peel taxpayers continue to receive good value. This work has resulted in both direct savings in the form of efficiencies and avoidance of costs. For Health and Human Services, who you'll hear from next, this work also includes improvements that cannot be measured in dollars, but instead in dramatic changes in both quality of life and safety. For example, under Council's direction, the Project Lifesaver review allowed adult day service to reallocate close to $200,000 after hearing from their users and the community that Peel's technology didn't actually meet their unique needs to keep their loved ones safe. The digital menu system in long-term care has also helped to avoid costs, and it means no delays to urgent meal changes that impact both meal satisfaction and safety. In total, our efforts have yielded cost savings of $0.1 million and cost avoidances of $0.4 million. I will now start with the detailed presentations with paramedic services. Paramedics deliver on the living mandate of the region's strategic plan to improve people's lives in their time of need. The 2020 budget will help Peel paramedics continue to maintain service levels and address growth in call volume. The biggest driver on paramedic services is the incredible volume of calls that are answered every year. Peel paramedics have seen a remarkable 35% increase in calls since 2015, from 288 calls a day to just under 400. In total, we have responded to about 142,000 calls by the end of the year, and by the end of 2020, that number will climb to almost 148,000. Unfortunately, still too many of these calls are triaged as life-threatening, even while they are not. 66% of the calls paramedics respond to are dispatched as life-threatening or lights and sirens, but only 7% of them go to the hospital that way. Peel Paramedics is always adapting to improve client outcomes and find better, more efficient ways to deliver their services. Council-supported advocacy to transform how calls are dispatched by the province is set to begin soon. And when complete, this work should help alleviate unnecessary pressures on the paramedics responding to calls and the logistics professionals who have to clean, restock, and get their vehicles back on the road quickly. Mental wellness is prioritized, and management and staff continue to collaborate on initiatives that improve the work environment and reduce absenteeism. Pre-hospital medical research and innovation has improved outcomes for patients, including those who have suffered life-threatening heart attacks. And a community paramedicine pilot in select Peel Living seniors buildings was designed to keep people in with lower priority medical concerns out of ambulances and emergency rooms. A report on our findings will be coming to council in early 2020. This graph on the left describes the call volume increase that I mentioned earlier. This increase is steep, 35% over 5 years, and we expect call volumes to continue to increase as Peel's community grow and develop and age over time. To keep pace with this increase in call volume and meet council-directed response times, Peel Paramedics needs to add 2 24/7 ambulances to maintain service levels for 2020. This includes 20 paramedics to make sure quality pre-hospital care is there for Peel residents and visitors when their worst moments happen. 50% of these costs will be shared by the province and paid to Peel in 2021. So the net annual resources to fund the 2020 recommended service level is $59.2 million. After inflation, the main driver of the 2020 operating budget is a service demand of $1.4 million. This budget reflects the new provincial funding model, which now puts a 1-year lag on both growth and inflation. Overall, the proposed change to the paramedics budget is $2.9 million. The paramedic services capital budget proposes an increase of $12.5 million. Of this amount, $4 million are designated for 6 new vehicles and associated equipment to meet growth in call demand. This allows us to add 2 24-hour ambulances into our system. Peel Paramedics also recommends $6.2 million to plan and develop 2 new satellite stations to meet future growth in call demand. Staff will continue to seek efficiencies and cost avoidances through co-location opportunities with local fire services. Finally, the proposed capital budget includes the replacement of up to 28 vehicles and other equipment that are at the end of their useful life. A more detailed report outlining the recommended plan for future facilities will come to council in the new year. This slide summarizes the overall resources required to fund the recommended 2020 levels of service for paramedics and reflects the province's announcement that it will increase funding next year. The 10-year capital investment of $117.9 million includes $50.1 million for growth-related stations and $42.5 million for the replacement of ambulances. Outlook years also assume that the province will continue to fund both growth and inflation 1 year after they happen. One new ambulance is included in each of the outlook years to manage service demand by growth in call volume. The next service highlighted for the 2020 budget is long-term care. With council support, Peel Long-Term Care Centres fill the gaps in the system that are not being met by private or nonprofit homes. Under council's direction, Peel focuses on those with the most complex needs, including advanced stage dementia. Staff use innovative, person-centered approaches like the Butterfly to support the clinical, physical, social, and psychological need of people who live in their homes. Our Butterfly units are homes, not just places to live, and the people who live and work there are thriving. And the results of Butterfly are significant. In Malton's Village's Butterfly household, the use of antipsychotic medication has been cut by 50%, and this is a key indicator of quality of life used by the province. As importantly, the people who live in the Butterfly households have come alive. They are more joyful, with far fewer feelings of sadness and depression, and their incredible personalities continue to shine through. Since 2010, we have seen a 50% increase in the proportion of residents living with dementia in our homes. And as of right now, 87% of people in our homes are either totally or extensively dependent on staff for their activities of daily living. Similar to other divisions, staff look to find internal efficiencies and savings before coming to council for any budget increase. Butterfly not only demonstrates dramatic improvements in the quality of life for those living in our homes, but we are also starting to see some cost avoidance. Fewer people have needed trips from our Butterfly homes to emergency rooms. This year, there has been a 70% drop in the number of hospital transfers compared to 2018. This provides cost savings to the health sector by reducing the impact of hallway medicine and also supports our staff on a daily basis. Additionally, staff working in the Butterfly are happier and healthier, so less sick time is taken and staff turnover is lower. All staff are trained to proactively address the complex medical needs of people living in our homes. This prevents illness and reduces hospital admissions. The lean process from Sick Kids Hospital has been modified to fit our homes, so frontline staff are empowered to find and implement efficiencies as part of their daily work. So as I mentioned earlier, Peel focuses on those with the most complex needs. 2 in every 3 people living in our homes are living with dementia. That puts our system under tremendous pressure. Under Council's direction, Peel continues to phase in the Butterfly households over several budget years. This allows staff to focus appropriate time on implementation in a way that guarantees success while also respecting the taxpayer. To introduce Butterfly to Tall Pines in 2020, we are asking for 3 new staff, specifically a personal support worker, dietary aide, and activation therapist. The net annual resources to fund the 2020 recommended levels of services is $39.1 million. As with paramedic, salaries and wages continue to be the biggest driver for long-term care. They make up approximately 75% of the total annual operating budget. Collectively bargained, annual increases for staffing are the largest increase to the tax base. The next biggest driver is inflationary costs related to expenses such as utilities, repairs, and maintenance. Costs are partially offset from increases in user fees to stay in line with inflation and align budget assumptions with actual user fees collected in the past several years. A new Butterfly household in Tall Pines supports those living with dementia and also helps the region advance the term of council priority to enhance supports for seniors. The net impact of the long-term care budget request is $2.4 million. Staff are recommending a capital investment of $2 million for 2020. Of the total request, half is for major facility maintenance to ensure continued state of good repair and safety, including parking lot paving. The remaining half is designated for equipment replacement such as lifts, beds, and humidifiers. All capital investments are allocated for Davis Center, Tall Pines, Malton Village, and Sheridan Villa. This slide summarizes the overall resources required to fund the recommended 2020 levels of services for long-term care. The outlook years include cost of living and inflation. They also include phased increases to operationalize Peel Manor redevelopment project, as well as Butterfly households in the newly developed facility in 2021 and 2022. The next service highlighted for the 2020 budget is adult day services. Every senior wants to stay in their home and community, and our adult day service programs help them to do just that. And they also help to give caregivers much needed rest and support, sometimes for a day or even overnight. Adult day services are offered at all 5 of our long-term care centers. Overnight respite is available at the Davis Center in Bolton. Caring for seniors at home can be extremely stressful. Peel's Day program delivers more than 38,000 days of care each year to give caregivers much needed rest and support. All 5 of our programs are full with waiting lists ranging from 6 months to a year. Managing complex needs dominates our work. Close to 3/4 of our day program clients need intensive supports of daily living to support their daily activities of daily living. This includes bathing, personal care, and medication administration. More than half of the people who come to our day program have dementia or some type of cognitive impairment, and this number continues to increase. Just like in long-term care, person-centered care is the focus of our adult day programming. It supports the emotional, physical, social, and therapeutic needs of current and future participants. The proposed expansion of service capacity at the future Seniors Health and Wellness Village at Peel Manor will help reduce the wait list and support aging in place. In addition, we continue to advocate to the Ministry of Long-Term Care and Ontario Health Teams and seek capital funding opportunities to find additional funding for Peel's day programs. The 2020 net operating budget for adult day services is $2.4 million and includes no new requests. The main driver for the 2020 budget is inflation. User fees for both regular and subsidized participants will be increased to keep in line with inflation and move towards full cost recovery. This will partially offset the pressure by just under $100,000. No new base funding has been announced, so the adult day services budget for 2020 has assumed no increase in funding. This slide summarizes the overall resources required to fund the recommended 2020 levels of services for adult day services. Outlook years consider cost of living and inflation adjustments. So I'm next going to focus on the first of three services in the thriving area of focus. As Council knows, healthcare is the biggest driver on the provincial budget. Treatment when someone gets sick is far more expensive than preventing that illness. The region focuses on helping to keep people well. Council's leadership in this area helps residents truly thrive and to live longer and better in their communities. This ranges all the way from healthy eating, good oral health, to healthy built environments, and smoke and vape-free public spaces. The region focuses its work to improve health across all ages. Vaping, especially for young people, is growing quickly. This year, more than 1 in 3 grade 12 students said they had vaped. Oral health is important to overall health. Screening and identifying children with urgent dental needs is critical. Peel Public Health screened more than 100,000 children this year and identified more than 13,500 of them with urgent concerns. Thanks to Council's leadership, we have improved the quality of life of 800 seniors who have had important repairs done to their teeth or received dentures this year. Staff adapt to changing health needs so programs meet current demands and help keep people out of emergency rooms. Programs also create a good return investment by preventing future healthcare costs. Emergency department visits for dental issues are a significant concern in Peel. The province estimates its new Ontario Seniors Dental Care Program will provide more than 8 times as many low-income seniors with ongoing care than the previous regional program. Schools remain a strong setting to influence future health choices and behavior on everything from proper nutrition, improved wellness, and stronger mental health. Bylaw work to protect residents from outdoor secondhand cannabis smoke and aerosol vapors from e-cigarettes and vapes is underway. The net annual resources to fund the 2020 recommended levels of services is $11.1 million. Inflation on salaries and wages, as well as goods and service, is the biggest driver on the 2020 operating budget. The budget also includes a council-approved reduction of $1.7 million for the ending of the region's seniors dental program, and the replacement of the province's funding reduction of $0.3 million as directed by council. Similar to 2019, the work on a mandatory community safety and well-being plan continues, and a portion is included here. This slide summarizes the overall 2020 chronic disease prevention budget recommendation to Regional Council, as well as forecasts for outlook years to 2023. All outlook years factor in the cost of living adjustments and inflation. The 2021 forecast includes an increase for a potential cost share funding model shift to 60-40. This is based on a funding announcement made by the province in April 2019. Since then, the province has verbally told us that the 60-40 change will not happen. However, since we have not received this confirmation in writing, we have kept the forecast at 60-40 to mitigate the risk to services. We will update council as we learn more from the province. Infectious disease prevention is a second area that connects to public health. Population growth is a key driver in this area. More people mean more risk of infections from vaccine-preventable diseases, foodborne illnesses, and sexually transmitted infections. Vigilant health protection saves lives, and public health delivers these services each and every day. Last school year, public health gave more than 73,000 immunizations directly to school-aged children and residents. This means that over 90% of 17-year-olds were optimally protected against measles, mumps, rubella, diphtheria, tetanus, and polio. And public health staff check the immunization records of more than 250,000 students each year. Every food service in Peel was inspected, many of them several times because of increased risk. Our system of red, yellow, and green signs, combined with enforcement activities, continues to encourage a high level of compliance across the region. And more than 500,000 clean needles were handed out by our harm reduction team. Safe drug practices mean better health. Public health looks for ways to be more efficient as part of our everyday management. A review of evidence and best practices found a different way to provide case management for chlamydia cases, improving the overall effectiveness of the program and allowing more residents to be seen. Strong relationships with local community partners means people who use drugs can now access clean needles, safer inhalation kits, and naloxone in 25 community locations across Peel. These tools reduce the spread of infectious diseases such as HIV, hepatitis B and C, and help prevent fatal overdoses. Parents can now report their child's vaccinations online. This greatly reduces parental stress, staff workload, and ultimately reduces school suspensions. Modernization of the food premise inspection results allows inspectors to upload information in close to real time, so details become public faster. So the net annual 2020 budget for infectious disease services is $11.4 million. The cost to maintain service levels is $0.7 million. After finding efficiencies of $72,000, the net cost to maintain services is $0.6 million. The provincial funding reduction of $0.4 million is included here, as directed by council. Similar to 2019, the work on a mandatory community safety and well-being plan continues, and a portion is included here. The overall proposed change to the service budget is $1 million. This slide summarizes the overall 2020 infectious disease prevention budget recommendation to Regional Council, as well as forecasts for outlook years to 2023. As with the chronic disease prevention budget, outlook years factor in cost of living adjustments and inflation. The 2021 forecast year also includes the possibility of the 60-40 cost share change that I mentioned in the chronic disease prevention presentation. And this slide summarizes the overall resources to fund the recommended 2020 levels of service for infectious disease prevention. So this slide summarizes the 2020 budget for the services that I presented. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and there are, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say the regional chair had a big smile on his face this morning as I was reading my morning papers, and right there on the front page of the Toronto Star, extolling the virtues of our butterfly model, Josh Matlow. And it wasn't, we need a, it was the Peel butterfly man, what they're doing at Malton, isn't it? He's our greatest cheerleaders. And when you get accolades like that next door, it just tells you the tremendous success that we're, because of the people that are administering it and this council that had the courage to bring the model in. But page 1 of the Toronto Star today, what a marvelous thing to be able to wake up to. And so on behalf of council, I commend you and all our staff there, and I want you to say how proud we are of them, of the marvelous success that this program has been. Councillor Rass.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you. You stole the words right out of my mouth, but you said it much more eloquently, so thank you. And congratulations on the expansion of the butterfly model into areas other than Peel. Question about, I'm hopeful for the continued advocacy for the dispatch reform. At the City of Mississauga, as we were going through our budget a couple of weeks ago, our second biggest expense driver is fire and emergency services. We responded to 15,000 medical calls last year. And I'm just wondering, in your opinion, would that, would dispatch reform help alleviate or better direct some of those calls to the provider that is the best appropriate to handle it? Or will there still be a kind of two-tier approach to sending out, not two-tier, sending out both ambulance and fire at the same time?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we're feeling optimistic as well. We've already reached out to the new advisor who's overseeing some of the enhancements and told them that we're quite keen to meet with them to discuss next steps. And we're feeling confident that some of the changes that they're proposing will impact our numbers. But I'll turn it over to the chief if you have something specific, Peter, to add in terms of the impact to our call volume.
Got to get used to red and green here. Through you, Mr. Chair, and to Councillor Raz, we are embarking on change in dispatch, finally, after close to 20 years that I've been advocating for change and good 12, 14 years here at the Region of Peel. And we're starting to enter into the discussions of the new triage model and new computer-aided dispatch technology. Chief Beckett, Chief Boyle from Brampton, and Chief Bailey and I are going to be meeting with the medical directors going into next year, talking about the new triage process, and it will amend the tiered response agreements where fire won't be going to as many calls, and it's proven by medical evidence, not I think it needs to go. It will be driven by medical evidence. Will we see a dramatic drop initially? No, but over time we will. And the fire chiefs are very open to that discussion, and we'll be bringing reports back to council at both levels, I would imagine, addressing that.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you very much, Chief. Quick question. Under the budget documents, for the provincial funding impact, it noted about $400,000 is reduced by the province to maintain services due to the elimination of structural compliance funding effective April 1st. What exactly is that?
So through the chair, we used to get funding to fix the infrastructure for long-term care, make sure we were in compliance, and they've taken that funding away now.
Was it a provincial requirement?
No, it used to be a finite bucket of money that you used to get from the province.
Okay, what's the compliance aspect of it?
Oh, it's so you meet the regulations, so as they upgrade the codes in the buildings, you have to meet compliance.
Oh, okay. Okay, I wasn't too sure on that. What else? Sorry, I have a lot of tabs. For the chronic disease prevention, how long is that funding for in terms of the creation of community safety and well-being plan? Does that make sense?
Yep,
It says
through the
it's
chair,
reserve funded.
council had approved that pilot project for 2 years, and it's fully funded from reserves.
Fully, just for 2 years?
Yep, it's a pilot project.
Okay, as a pilot project, and we often know that our pilot projects turn into permanent projects. That's just an aside. Oh, that's on water. Hold on one second. That's it for this section. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sato.
Thank you. Kathy, you know I'm going to ask about the senior daycare again. On slide 19, I guess part of my concern, and I've raised this before, because when you gave us your last presentation, I guess about a month or so ago, the need is much greater than what we are putting into our budget for. And there are no increases in the budget. So you have stated on slide 19 that staff are advocating for expanded services to support aging in place. I guess part of my concern is that the day services seem to be located in areas that many of the seniors cannot get to. And so I guess I'm looking at a bigger long-term picture, actually short-term picture, of how we can provide some of those services in neighborhoods, rather than expecting the seniors to travel, because many of them cannot if they don't have someone to drive them to that facility. Then they may not be able to access the services that we're now providing. And I think, you know, you've made it very clear in other presentations that that is such a critical service for seniors, because if we put the money into that, then they can remain in their homes. Otherwise, we're putting more money, which costs more, into long-term care.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, we do agree that it's a very valuable service. I know at the Ontario Health Team tables, they are starting to discuss this more in terms of the need, and also through our seniors term of council priority. We will be discussing transportation issues and ways that we can advocate and look for further funding to increase spaces across the community. I know that it has been discussed, though, certainly at those integrated tables that our senior services director sits at. So I appreciate the concern. We do continue to talk to our key stakeholders, and we continue to advocate for the province for more funding. And
So with the recent announcement, because we've been getting the information from, at our last meeting of the Integrated Health Services Committee, we had the presentation from each of the agencies that were applying for the health, what's the title?
the Ontario Health Team.
Ontario Health Team,
Yeah.
thank you. And with the more recent announcement that was made, I guess just a couple of days ago, at Trillium, which I think was made at UTM, but with Trillium. So is there anything, I was trying to remember on their presentation, because each of the applicants was focusing on basically a different area of health concern. So, and I know this is just the first step, because I think what the announcement was that you've kind of made the short list, not the actual awarding of what's going to happen. So at this point, is it looking positive for
this issue to
for
be
this
addressed?
issue to be addressed through those announcements?
Donna?
Through you, Chair. Each of the applicants had to determine what their first year lane would be. In terms of all services of health coming in under the Ontario Health Team umbrella, eventually, over an iterative process, that is what is expected. In the particular Trillium, which is now called Mississauga OHT application, adult day was not identified in year one.
Okay, so if we want to move forward on this, it's going to have to be done by the region then, if we want to expand. So I guess, you know, looking at the budget, I don't see any plans for our year one to be moving forward to expand that program. And
Certainly.
and I'm not saying I want to add more money onto the budget, but I just feel that, you know, you've given us so much justification for that need. And with the aging population, that need is just going to grow, and I don't think we're addressing it fully.
Councillor Sato, on that point, the CAO will comment, then I'll come back to you and then staff.
I'm just going to suggest, because you make some very good points, Councillor Sato, and I know the team has done some fabulous work.
Oh, they have.
Why don't we suggest that the team go back and in this year really work on what that next step would be if we need to advance our adult day programs in light of the Ontario Health Teams developing the Seniors Health and Wellness Village evolving, and we can bring that back for future budget discussions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dasko.
Thank you, and through the chair. Just a quick question. On slide 27, I believe it is, yeah, slide 27, you had mentioned that there was a 60-40 split, and when a change comes that you would give us an update. In the interim, is there any kind of ballpark number that you might have for us?
Through the chair, to answer your question, right now we don't know anything other than the 60-40, so they haven't proposed an alternate split. We know what the impact of the 60-40 is, but no one's thrown up a different number other than 60-40.
Wait and see approach, okay.
Yeah, as we had mentioned, they did tell us verbally that it wouldn't change for next year, so that's what we're going to hope. But we did put the 60-40 in just to mitigate the risk for this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is all for this file. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Moving on, 7.2, presentation by Janice Sheehy, Commissioner of Human Services.
Yeah, good. I'm good, thanks. No worries. I think I'm good, yeah. You ready? Ready.
Chair and members of Council, I'm Janice Sheehy, Commissioner of Human Services, and with me today is Carrie Bizzelli, Finance Manager supporting our department. It's my pleasure to explain how our proposed 2020 budget recommendations contribute to a community for life. We have reviewed programs in all divisions as part of a continuing effort to ensure they are effective in making progress towards Council's stated priorities. We continue to maintain and deliver services to some of the most vulnerable people in the community, always striving to demonstrate empathy and compassion. Both our Chief Administrative Officer and our Chief Financial Officer have discussed how the province's 20% reduction in funding the Child Care Expansion Program impacts the region's finances. The province recently deferred some of their expected funding reductions originally planned for 2020, but they remain in our forecast years. The province also made funding reductions to our income and employment programs, including capping funding at prior year levels and canceling programs. Peel faces a high demand for our homelessness supports and shelter system, but the 2020 budget does not include any additional external funding in this service area. Rather, we continue working on the evolution of our program delivery model to reflect a needs-based approach. Another source of pressure is that the province is not providing additional funding for inflationary cost increases or increases in service. We recognize that while Council recommended 2020 budget investment of $5.2 million to maintain service levels, the department must also identify ways of mitigating the province's funding reductions. For early years, staff identified $1 million in savings by consolidating programs. As approved by Council, these funds will support early on system enhancements in 2020, such as special needs resourcing supports and increased program hours and locations across Peel. By realigning our base budgets, we were able to address emerging issues without contributing to a tax increase. In addition, we have accessed the provincial audit and accountability funding for child care fee subsidy. Preliminary findings from the review indicate that there may be potential cost savings in provincial dollars in 2021 and beyond, with no impact expected on the 2020 regional budget. This report will be finalized and shared with the province and made public by year end. I'll now cover the 7 areas in human services, beginning with early growth and development. Human Services and Health Services collaborate on Council's direction in supporting a healthy start in life for all children in Peel. As you can see from these numbers, families in Peel are welcomed and encouraged to use our infant feeding services, which includes home visits. Parents have access to nutrition and health services, parenting and family literacy programs, and we have enhanced special needs supports. Our early on child and family centers provide access to free programming for 95,000 children, parents, and caregivers. With your indulgence, I would like to run the video that we had previously tried to show at Council, but were unable to do so due to technical difficulties.
Are you a parent or caregiver looking for a place where you can learn and play with your child? Or are you a new parent looking for opportunities to connect with other parents and get support in your new role? At Early On, there's something for everyone. Early On Child and Family Centers offers free, high-quality, drop-in programs for families with children 6 and under. Early On centers are located throughout Peel and are open weekdays, evenings, and weekends. Each center strives to meet the unique needs of families living in the community.
What I like about the Early On programs is the inclusiveness with all the kids. The people at the program are so warm and welcoming, so it makes you just feel like you want to come all the time.
Why come to Early On? To join in activities such as reading, sing-alongs, arts and crafts, get advice from early childhood professionals, meet other parents, find out about community services, and participate in support groups for parents who are feeling overwhelmed. Participate in school readiness programs and find out about early development supports for children.
There's a lot of activities here that the kids can do that will help in their development, and that's kind of what I look forward to, in seeing them grow and have fun.
Visit an Early On center today and get connected to services for your family. Visit peelregion.ca/children.
Our programs promote healthy food and physical activity in the early years to support lifelong health. With funding for the Healthy Babies, Healthy Children program frozen since 2008, we have streamlined delivery. I apologize, I'm going to have to ask for a break.
No problem, let's take a break.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, why don't we recess for 5 minutes? Not a bad idea, Mayor Crombie. Why don't we grab a bite for lunch now if it's ready to go, and we'll come right back. So I want everybody back for, let's say, 12:15. We will see you then. Thank you. My thanks to Councillor Starr for going back there and being the party whip and getting, I appreciate it. And starting and reconvening, I was remiss in not acknowledging Harkarat Singh is here on behalf of Councillor Dillon, also the local councillor for Brampton 9 and 10. Welcome, and I should have acknowledged you. My apologies. Thank you for pinch hitting. Janice is just fine, but we thought we'd let Norm carry on with the second half of his presentation. But I told Norm, at the end of the month, I don't want to see an overtime check. This is a tough budget year. This is all duties as assigned. So if you could carry on, please. Thank you.
Certainly. So our programs promote healthy food and physical activity in early years and support lifelong health. With funding for the Healthy Babies, Healthy Children program, frozen since 2008, we have streamlined delivery through the creation of a screening tool. This allows us to serve those clients most in need and use resources effectively. In 2019, we continue promoting access to early on programs and striving to meet the needs of underserved and growing communities. We opened 9 new centers and added 162 weekly program hours, representing a 22% increase. In 2020, we will open 10 centers in newly developing communities and add 168 hours per week across Peel. We are also using a new resourcing model to increase special needs supports in school-based childcare locations. The net annual resources required to fund the 2020 recommended levels of service for early growth and development are $16.7 million. The base budget includes maintaining programs, $1 million to enhance customized early on programs with no budget impact, and an additional $200,000 to fund services in public health. This slide summarizes the overall 2020 early growth and development budget recommendation to Regional Council. The outlook year 2021 reflects the shift in the public health funding model to 60/40 and the continued expansion of the new early on service delivery model. I will now move into the living area focus, starting with housing support. Housing support is currently implementing the region's 10-year Peel Housing and Homelessness Plan. Demand for affordable housing in Peel is increasing at an unprecedented rate. This is due to many factors, including population growth, rising house prices, low rental vacancy rates, and an increase in precarious employment. As these figures indicate, we assist a significant number of people in need with affordable housing challenges in a variety of ways. As Council's designated service system manager, we are finding new and innovative ways to operate efficiently and effectively, and to deliver better and more targeted services. Housing support manages 17,508 housing units geared towards low-income households. This includes subsidized and affordable market units. Most of these units are within 48 community housing providers. Others are made available through rent supplement agreements with private landlords. We are exploring new ways of using the existing private stock to increase the supply of affordable housing in Peel. We will be presenting reports to the Strategic Housing and Homelessness Committee over the next few months with our detailed plans. The net annual resources required to fund the 2020 recommended levels of service for housing support are $117.1 million. The 2020 budget includes an additional $1.4 million in funds through the Canada-Ontario Community Housing Initiative. These dollars will be used to fund rent supplements. There is no net impact to the region as a result of this funding stream. In 2020, we will continue to invest in state of good repair by assisting community housing providers with capital work and ensuring our region-owned housing is well maintained. These capital investments are funded from internal housing reserves. The recently approved Housing Master Plan, which will enable us to create 5,700 affordable and emergency units, has been included in the 10-year capital plan, but with no requirement for new investment in 2020, as there are over $300 million representing 840 new units in approved projects already in the development stage. And as you are aware, we are currently in the process of finalizing a new financing strategy. We hope to be in a position to make a public announcement early in the new year. Our plan to build new units is only one component of our multi-pronged approach to helping people get and keep housing. We are transforming our services to focus on those most in need, including providing wraparound support so people stay housed. We are exploring new programs to leverage existing private stock, including a revised Second Suites program, host programs for seniors and youth, and converting commercial and institutional sites into residential units. Finally, we are designing incentive programs to encourage private and nonprofit developers to build their own affordable housing in Peel. This slide summarizes the overall 2020 housing support budget recommendation to Regional Council. I will now move to the homelessness support service area. To support people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness, services include emergency shelters, transitional housing, mobile street outreach, eviction prevention funding, and help in finding permanent housing. There is growing demand on Peel's shelter system due to increased chronic and episodic homelessness, a trend that is being seen across Southern Ontario. The almost 12,000 visits to regionally owned shelters includes those who came once or those who returned multiple times. In addition, transitional housing at Peel Youth Village, Angela's Place, and New Leaf St. Leonard's helped almost 200 people. Shelters provide a broad range of supports and services to help clients stabilize their living situation. As you can see, this was achieved for over 1,100 clients. The region's 5 emergency shelters and 3 transitional housing facilities are operating at or above capacity. A mobile outreach service to address street homelessness includes a team that can deliver mental health services, substance use support, and harm reduction. A new extreme weather protocol includes extended outreach and hours on the road during hot and cold weather alerts. Although it is becoming increasingly difficult to find permanent housing for our most vulnerable clients, we are continuing to look for ways to relieve that pressure and meet needs. The Housing First philosophy means we strive to place our hardest to house chronically homeless clients and into permanent housing as quickly as possible. We then provide them with the supports they need to stay housed. Human trafficking is a serious and growing crime with tragic consequences. Peel is showing leadership by providing safe housing for survivors, which allows them to access supports that can help in regaining wellness and self-confidence. This program was launched as a 3-year pilot. However, in 2020, we are starting to phase in the tax impact of the $1.8 million annual cost, in anticipation that it may potentially become a permanent program. Although there have been announcements lately about federal and provincial funding, these programs do not provide operating dollars. As committed to Council, we continue to explore opportunities to secure external sources of funding. The net annual resources required to fund the 2020 recommended levels of service for homelessness support are $13.2 million. As presented, the budget includes regional funding for the anti-human sex trafficking program and maintaining service levels in base programs such as shelter operations and housing stability. This slide summarizes the overall 2020 homelessness support budget recommendation to Regional Council. The outlook years 2021 and 2022 include the continued phasing in of the tax impact for the anti-human sex trafficking program, resulting in the full $1.8 million annual program cost funded with regional dollars by 2023. I'll now move on to the income support service area. Income support assists Ontario Works clients in accessing financial supports and benefits. Our focus is on enabling clients to achieve independence and exit the social assistance system. The changing nature of employment and population growth continue to have an impact on Ontario Works caseloads, discretionary benefits, and other financial supports. Ontario Works benefit costs are fully paid by the province. Nearly 2.5% of Peel's population is in receipt of Ontario Works. If we factor in the Ontario Disability Support Program, the percentage of the population rises to 4.3%. Caseloads are going down in Peel, a trend that is not generally being seen amongst our municipal comparator group. Since January 2019, the average number of caseloads has decreased by almost 9%. Despite this decrease, the client-to-caseworker ratio continues to be high at approximately 130 cases per worker. For context, ministry guidelines identify a ratio of 90 to 120 clients per caseworker. The decrease in caseload is helping us to enhance our focus on effective case management. Given the evolving nature of provincial social assistance policy and the complexity of client issues, we continue to review processes to try to make them simpler, more efficient, and in compliance with ministry requirements. The move from paper to electronic files, which I've highlighted in previous budget presentations, means that we can quickly and easily review files and search for data. This Peel-led initiative continues to place us ahead of the province in terms of digitizing files. Council previously approved a request for funding a new IT booking system, which is currently being implemented, a self-serve technology which will reduce administrative burden. The net annual resources required to fund the 2020 recommended levels of service for income support are $23.5 million. New requests are being made for 2020, and this increase is just for inflation. This slide summarizes the overall 2020 income support budget recommendation to Regional Council. All outlook years factor in inflation. This increase is funded through the tax base as there are no anticipated increases in provincial funding. The employment support area is next. In employment support services, we provide a range of programs for Ontario Works clients in seeking, securing, and maintaining employment. The high rate of unemployment in Peel and a rise in precarious employment continues to affect clients. The Summer Job Challenge program and employment of internship opportunities provide pathways into the workforce for our clients. 10% of our Ontario Works caseloads have employment earnings that average $985 per month, one of the highest in the province. With Council's approval, we submitted a proposal to the province to be the local employment service system manager. We are awaiting future direction from the province on this. In the past, Peel's programs and services focus on those with multiple barriers to employment, such as lack of basic literacy or skills and challenges with mental health and well-being. Today, we are also working more closely with job-ready clients. In an ongoing effort to help clients achieve independence, we've changed our service delivery model in-house, which has increased collaboration among staff. We've modernized by extending our reach online. This includes enabling a mobile experience. The net annual resources required to fund the 2020 recommended levels of service for employment support are $3.1 million. We based our 2020 budget on the status quo. We will return to Council when and if our employment proposal is successful to highlight potential budget implications. This slide summarizes the overall 2020 employment support budget recommendation to Regional Council. All outlook years factor in inflation. This increase is funded through the tax base as there are no anticipated increases in provincial funding. I will now move to the community investment area. Our community investment division supports inclusive, responsive, and targeted programs that meet the needs of people in Peel. As the 12.8% figure suggests, too many Peel households experience poverty. This figure is from the 2016 census and represents just under 176,000 households. The Affordable Transit Program, delivered in partnership with Brampton and Mississauga, provides a subsidized transit pass at a 50% discount. There were 345,000 people served through the agencies funded by the Community Investment Program. Grants to those agencies totaled $7 million. As approved by Council, the Community Investment Program modifies its funding streams to include funding caps. This contributes to a broader distribution of limited resources and makes the process more accessible to community agencies. A 2-year social purpose enterprise pilot project, endorsed by Council in May 2019, will support community agencies in applying commercial strategies to help in reducing poverty, creating jobs, and attracting revenue. Such social enterprises might include, for example, a commercial printing business that employs people with disabilities. In addition, the program changes to the Community Investment Program I mentioned earlier encourage agencies to seek alternate sources of funding. As we make the change, a one-time transition fund is designed to mitigate impacts from these changes. The Affordable Transit Program, which I described a few moments ago, has a $1 million 2019 annual budget. The charts on the screen, while they have different scales, are presented to show the variability in demand for the past month over month. As we previously reported to Council, it continues to be challenging to accurately model forecasted demand and patterns of usage in this program, resulting in an increased over-expenditure in 2019 of up to additional $800,000. As a result of the demand on the program, a $600,000 increase is being recommended, bringing the revised program budget to $1.6 million. The current Presto technology used by transit authorities is constrained in the ability to cap sales. As a result, a recommendation was presented to Council that Effective January 1st, 2020, staff limit the number of new applications processed. An evaluation of the original transit pilot demonstrated the value of the program by determining the users had enhanced access to employment, education services, food, recreational and medical services, as well as increased social engagement. It has estimated that there is a social return on investment of $3.93 for every dollar invested. Further information will be provided to Council on December 12th to assist with budget deliberations in this area. Council directed Human Services to implement the Community Hub Development Framework to guide our role in the creation and support of hubs and to encourage integrated service delivery models. The 2020 capital budget includes Regional Council approved support for the City of Mississauga's Malton Community Hub through the inclusion of a $6 million capital grant to be cash flowed in 2020 and 2021. In addition, the City of Brampton has requested a $6 million capital grant to be included in the proposed 2020 budget. This grant appears as a placeholder, thereby reflecting the discussion from the November 14, 2019 Council meeting. The net annual resources required to fund the 2020 recommended levels of service for community investment are $11.5 million. As presented, the budget includes funds from a reserve for a social enterprise pilot and transitional fund and includes an additional $600,000 for the Affordable Transit Program. This slide summarizes the overall 2020 community investment budget recommendation to Regional Council. Childcare, the last service area, will be discussed next. The region's 5-year service system plan sets a roadmap for meeting council-endorsed priorities for a childcare system that is affordable, inclusive, high quality, accountable, and accessible. Despite recent funding changes by the provincial government, we are committed to achieving this goal in 2020 and beyond. Using provincial funding, we supported over 46,000 licensed childcare spaces in Peel and provided wage enhancement grants to help retain and attract highly qualified childcare staff. We also provided more than 17,000 fee subsidies to lower-income families attending a licensed childcare setting. We have found efficiencies by focusing on system plan priorities through the ongoing development of a new childcare affordability model, maintaining or reducing our administration expenses to adjust to changes in cost share, supporting competitive wages and benefits, and investing in training to attract and retain qualified staff in the childcare sector. As already mentioned, accessing the provincial audit and accountability funding to improve the efficiency and accountability of fee subsidy, and continuing to engage with our stakeholders and increase our advocacy efforts. The net annual resources required to fund the 2020 recommended levels of service for childcare are $12.7 million. The main driver of the net increase to the childcare budget is the council-approved $5.2 million cost share increase for the expansion plan program. This slide summarizes the overall 2020 childcare budget recommendation to Regional Council. There is also a capital investment of $100,000 for state of good repair at regionally owned facilities being leased to childcare providers. This cost is offset by rental revenues. The outlook years 2021 and 2022 include estimated additional cost share requirements from the province. In conclusion, this slide summarizes the 2020 budgets for the services I presented. Someone else other than me would be pleased to answer questions.
Norm, well done. And we have a list of questions through to the Commissioner. So Councillor McFadden, questions, please.
Thank you very much, Norm. Some people will do anything to get out of a budget presentation.
Very good. Commissioner, we're good to go to questions now?
Yes.
Perfect. Councillor McFadden.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question about the Ontario Works. I know that we've been in a discussion over the last couple of days on this, but I see that there's 130 cases per worker that they have to deal with. So what supports are in place to detect fraud?
To detect fraud. So we actually have specialized staff called eligibility review officers who work with the Ontario Works workers in order to investigate any allegations of fraud. They also provide them with some training so that they can see various red flag indicators that might be in the files that they're working on. And there is a hotline in place to report on potential tips for fraud.
Okay, so do the workers do periodic checks on the people that are in their caseload to check to see if everything is in order?
So through the chair, that is part of what the normal course of work is that they do when they do file management and case management. But we also have to, as part of the ministry directed mandate, go through a percentage of files each month and do that kind of review looking for fraud.
Okay, I was just concerned because I have such a big caseload of 130 per worker that they might not get a chance to do that. And, you know, it costs us a lot of money when they're defrauding the system. So I was just checking on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dasko.
Thank you, and through the chair. Glad you're feeling better.
Yes, thank you.
I just wanted to ask, I caught on slide 34, when Norm was going through everything, there was some talk about, I guess, I don't know if I heard it right or if I didn't hear it right, about eliminating, I guess, supporting some programs, one of them being a packaging company. Do you have any more detail on that?
So I believe through the chair, what you were hearing is an example of a social enterprise organization. So that was merely being provided as an example what social enterprise actually is.
Okay. All right. So that would be, that's going to be eliminated? Is
Sorry, let me just flip to that slide.
Yeah.
Was this the commercial printing example?
I believe so, yeah.
So that was merely a hypothetical example.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, that was a hypothetical. And then I just wanted to go over to slide 44 under childcare and just look at the net expenditure. We've got for example, the 2021 is forecasted a 22% increase. Is this because of downloading or?
So through the chair, this is the expected change in cost share between the provincial and regional dollars. So as the province continues to expect the region to add more dollars into administrative funding, that's the percentage increase.
So from the province, that's a nice high. How are you? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kovac.
Thank you, and through the chair, Janice, thank you for your and Norman's presentation. In the presentation on slide 16, you'd mentioned the need to manage increased demand for shelters, transitional housing, and facilities for human sex trafficking survivors. I'm wondering, how does Mississauga's downtown core in particular factor into our planning? Given the nature of, the growing, there are many condos going up, and there's a growing fear that human sex trafficking is happening right under our noses.
So through the chair, just so I'm clear on your question, are you asking if there are specific efforts targeted to the downtown? So I'll answer that in two ways if I could. In terms of our mobile outreach service, which does go out to make connections with homeless individuals, vulnerable people, there are specific targeted efforts to be in those areas where we know there is a high volume, and that does include the downtown of both Brampton and Mississauga. So the mobile outreach team is out there looking for vulnerable people in the downtown sector.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Kovac. Councillor Parrish.
Yes, thank you. Welcome back. I can remember when I first ran for election, I was terrified of public speaking. I'm sure that's not what happened to you, but I used to stand up and my knees would shake and my tongue would stick to the roof of my mouth. When the question period started, I was like superstar because I was a former teacher. And you're here being a superstar with the questions, but people accused me of being a fake. But I'm not accusing you. I'm just happy you're up on your feet. And I think Norman's a prize. I think we should clone him because he can fit in anywhere. He can do anything. And I'm sure he would have made up really good answers for you if he had to. What I am going to question you on the idea of flexibility with homeless, I went down to the Stacked sort of sales entertainment area in Toronto, and it's on Front Street and can't remember what the other one was. It's down there anyway. Oh yeah, Bathurst in front. And as I was walking into it, and it's a pretty posh area, very expensive clothing and all these little stacked trailer things. And there was a blue tent, a giant blue tent beside it. And I said, what's that? And they said, oh, that's a homeless tent, homeless shelter. And it moves. It stays there for when the need is great here, and then we move it somewhere else when the need is great. The thing that was fascinating about it is when the Stats guy first came in, he thought this was going to be a chiller on the people coming in to hang around in his location. And he said what they did in the beginning was they hired people from there to help set up the whole thing. And they've continued to hire people from there to clean up and to generally do labor jobs around the site. So that's a long way of getting to, have we ever considered, I'm always thinking of Malton, but there are other areas all over Peel where the homeless shelters seem to be all towards Etobicoke, and look, and you can't put them everywhere. But if you had some like that they inflate them somehow, and they're waterproofed fabric, and they're pretty simple, and they have porta potties in them, and everything seems to be able to move very quickly. Have we looked at any of that? Have we toured the Toronto ones?
So through the chair, I believe the reason that Toronto has used that model is because they don't have capacity. So that model allows them the flexibility to create shelters where they need to create shelters, and mainly during the winter when their capacity goes so high. In Peel, our philosophy is that we don't turn anyone away from the shelter, so it has never been a capacity issue for us. When the shelters get full, we use hotels and motels. So we haven't specifically looked at that model, but we are doing some interesting things, and we do plan to do more outreach with community groups and churches to see if there is a better way to accommodate those individuals who are homeless but don't like to go to shelters. So certainly that's something we'll take a look at as well.
It would be worth a look to find out what they cost, and I assume it's got to be less expensive than having a permanent location and much less expensive than hotels and motels. And there's a certain degree of community involvement too. The people around there seem to have welcomed it with open arms, and it seems to be working well there. So, and I like the idea that it can move. So if you're willing to look into that, I'm delighted.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions. Janice, thank you very much. Thank you, Norm, as well. That brings us on to 7.4, a presentation by Andrew Farr, Acting Commissioner of Public Works.
There it is.
Whenever you're good to go, Andrew.
I'm ready to go. Excuse me. So good afternoon, Chair Unica, members of council. I am Andrew Farr, Acting Commissioner of Public Works, and I'm pleased to be here today to present our 2020 Public Works budget. Joining me today is my colleague, Arvin Moni, our Manager of Finance for Public Works. So while Public Works had no direct funding impacts from the provincial announcements, this service continues to experience pressures. The three largest drivers in the 2020 budget are aging infrastructure, population growth, and climate change. However, we must also accommodate for inflation in our services. This includes an increase to our contracts for several services in Public Works, and lower revenues from recycled materials also continue to be a challenge. Despite these financial realities, we continue to move forward, striving to assure our businesses are sustainable. Two priorities in 2020 are health and safety and enterprise asset management. The region is aiming to be a leader in health and safety. We are developing standards that will improve employee safety, reduce workplace risks, and create better and safer working conditions. We're also focusing on enterprise asset management. To make sure our infrastructure remains sustainable in the long run, we recommend adding 5 staff across Public Works. This includes staff in water and wastewater, waste management, and roads and transportation. These staff members will be responsible for things like life cycle planning, acquisition and disposal, maintenance schedules, and operations and risk assessments. Overall, this investment across Public Works will ensure effective stewardship of our public assets. In order to focus on these priorities and alleviate some of the funding impacts in other areas, Public Works staff rolled up their sleeves and found efficiencies across the department. This efficiency work, some of which you are already aware of, includes electricity savings in water and operational efficiencies in TransHelp, as well as changes to our waste management fees. We're transitioning to LED lighting on our roads and are discontinuing the collection of grass clippings. These changes have allowed us to assemble a budget that reflects today's fiscal reality while continuing to meet the needs of the community and adapt to new legislative requirements. Let me begin with our first service in Public Works, water supply. As you know, we treat and distribute water to Peel residents and businesses, ensuring that Peel's water meets or exceeds Ontario's drinking water quality standards. Providing safe drinking water is a 24-hour-a-day job, and we are considered leaders in this area. Peel is very active at the provincial level, always at the table, and involved in updates to new regulations to ensure Ontario's drinking water remains best in class. We maintain the 4th largest water system in Canada, and it continues to grow. Our growing population places increased demand on our water system, while new regulations often lead to more and increased compliance efforts. While there are no new major initiatives for this service, ongoing investment and maintenance is needed to keep our water supply sustainable in the long term. To ensure our infrastructure continues to support Peel's growing population, we're using new methods to assess the condition of our water mains and have greatly improved our maintenance and repair techniques. We have helped residents and businesses manage the impacts of construction. For example, we have ambassadors acting as liaisons, communicating project activities on a regular basis. They also provide a consistent and active resource for local residents and businesses to contact with challenges they may be facing. In 2020, we will also be developing a long-term financial plan to ensure our utility services remain financially sustainable. We will research different financial models across North America to ensure we form a tighter linkage between water consumption, the amount customers pay, and the services they receive. As mentioned by the CFO and reported to Council on November 14th, to maintain our water and wastewater infrastructure in a state of good repair, we recommend maintaining the 5% infrastructure levy for this year and the next 2 years. This requirement will be reassessed once the long-term financial sustainability plan is completed in time for the 2023 budget. As you also heard on November 14th, we are recommending the addition of 3 staff to support the region's Enterprise Asset Management Program, which will be shared across water and wastewater. 1.5 staff are reflected here in the water budget, and the other 1.5 are in wastewater. The cost for these resources will be funded through capital projects. Earlier this year, as part of our annual review, we mentioned the need to increase the management and oversight of the Aqua contract, given its growth in size and complexity. The proposed budget includes adding 1 staff member to meet this need for the new contract effective January 1st, 2020. For clarity, the Ontario Clean Water Agency, commonly known as Aqua, operates and maintains key water and wastewater infrastructure for the region. We're also recommending 1 contract staff to focus on health and safety, one of the priorities I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation. This staff member will work with our field staff to identify and manage risks and hazards so we can improve the safety of our work environments. This investment is fully funded through capital. The net annual resources to fund the 2020 recommended levels of service for water supply is $246 million. The main driver to cost is the 5% increase to the reserve contribution. This is required to maintain our infrastructure and service levels. We are also increasing Aqua's contract to account for new infrastructure they will operate and maintain in the coming year. The 2020 capital plan in water focuses on system improvements, water main replacement, and the construction of new water mains and reservoirs to service new growth demands. This is not an exhaustive list. However, it shows some of the major projects we will be undertaking in 2020. This slide summarizes the overall 2020 water supply budget recommendation to Regional Council. As reported to Council on November 14th, the proposed 10-year capital plan incorporates a change in planning horizon from 2031 to 2041. The outlook years including inflation, along with the 5% infrastructure levy to 2022. The levy will be reassessed by the end of 2022 to inform the 2023 budget. Our second service is wastewater. Peel's wastewater service collects and treats millions of liters of wastewater every day in a safe and environmentally responsible manner. The wastewater service also administers and enforces our wastewater bylaw and helps prevent unauthorized discharges to the environment. Just like in water supply, wastewater continues to grow. We've seen an increase in flows of 11 million liters a day on average since 2018. We've added 265 kilometers of sewers and forest mains since last year and 1,456 new accounts. This represents an 8% increase year over year. As you can imagine, these increases drive the need for more maintenance and repairs as our system ages and grows. While wastewater has experienced increased flow due to population growth, we're also seeing the effects of climate change, which has led to more inflow and infiltration in our sewers. We're investing in new technology and construction standards. One example is shown in this photo. As the first municipality in Canada to adopt this new tunnel liner technology, we're able to reduce both the construction and long-term maintenance costs. As we've communicated to Council, we're addressing the top inflow and infiltration areas. For example, focusing on where the excess flows are coming from has enabled us to reduce the flow by 55% in the Laurenwood Creek sewer shed in Mississauga. We continue to adapt to the effects of climate change in other ways, by installing LED lights in wastewater treatment facilities, reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 10 tons annually, and reusing excess fill for the Jim Toby Lakeview Conservation Area. This reduces truck traffic in our communities and our carbon footprint, leading to a reduction of 13,600 tons of greenhouse gases annually. We're also expanding Peel's wastewater system by constructing the east-west diversion sewer to accommodate growth and better manage excess flows during severe rainfall events. As I mentioned in water, in order to maintain a state of good repair of our assets, we're recommending the 5% infrastructure levy for this year and the next 2 years. This requirement will be reassessed once the long-term financial sustainability plan has been completed. We are recommending adding a total of 6.5 staff in wastewater to meet our service demands in 2020. We've included funding for 1.5 staff to support the region's enterprise asset management program, which will be funded through capital projects and are shared across water and wastewater. We're also proposing to add 1 staff in wastewater to support the Aqua contract, given its growth in size. 2 staff members are proposed for the design and construction support for condition assessment and rehabilitation of wastewater infrastructure. These costs will be recovered through capital projects. 2 staff members are proposed to build and support a formal management system framework for the operations and maintenance of our wastewater system. This will be aligned with the Drinking Water Quality Management Standard, which has been in place for many years in the water supply service. The net operating impact for these resources will be $390,000 each year beginning in 2020. The net annual resources to fund the 2020 recommended level of service for wastewater is $157.2 million. The main driver for the growth in costs is the 5% rate increase required for infrastructure. Inflation is also reflected in the modest increase to the Aqua contract due to growth in the infrastructure they operate and maintain. This slide highlights the funding sources for the 2020 capital plan. The expenditures are driven by system improvements, sewer rehabilitation, and replacements to maintain and improve service levels. As in water, this is not an exhaustive list. However, it shows some of the major projects that are underway. This slide summarizes the overall 2020 wastewater budget recommendation to Regional Council. As reported to Council on November 14th, the proposed 10-year capital plan incorporates the change in planning horizon from 2031 to 2041. The outlook years include inflation along with the 5% infrastructure levy to 2022. Moving on to waste management. Peel's waste management service ensures residential waste is collected and maintained in a safe, reliable, and environmentally responsible way. We're focusing on providing cost-effective services while managing ongoing population growth, improving our diversion rate, and meeting changing provincial, federal, and global policy requirements. In recent years, changing global policies have also created the need for Peel to improve the quality of our recycling materials in order to continue exporting them to certain foreign markets. As Peel grows, we generate more waste. At the same time, we continue to work towards increasing the rate of diversion. Peel recycles about 50% of its residential waste, and about 90% of those recyclable plastics we collect are turned into new products. The rest ends up in landfill. However, half of what ends up in landfill could actually have been diverted. To meet Council's 75% diversion target by 2034, we're making considerable investments in waste facilities and updating how we enforce our bylaws. We're also focusing on engaging with the community. Education will help us reduce the amount of recyclable and organic materials that get tossed in the garbage. Finally, we are striving to meet the food and organic waste diversion target set by the province, which is 70% by 2023. To support our 75% diversion target, 2 investments are currently underway. Regional Council approved a $23 million capital investment in June 2018 to upgrade our waste facility on Torbram Road. This will ensure paper continues to be marketable despite changing global markets. Procurement is underway for Peel's new anaerobic digestion facility, which will expand our green bin program to accept items like diapers and pet waste. It will also produce renewable natural gas that can be used to reduce our GHG emissions. The region will continue to influence provincial direction on full producer responsibility for the Blue Box program and the Food and Organics Waste Action Plan. As we reported earlier this fall, this file is moving in the right direction. We are piloting the collection of textiles in partnership with nonprofit agencies. Should the program be successful at full scale, we estimate that over 5,000 tons of textiles could be diverted annually. And to ensure we're doing our part as waste generators, we've added green bin collection into Peel's long-term care facilities. Working with the community to reduce waste and improve our recycling efforts is key to increasing Peel's diversion targets. To do this, we recommend investing in 7 contract staff to continue a pilot project that provides education and enforcement so residents can properly participate in our green bin and recycling programs. Although those 7 staff are currently funded from capital, they're an important investment that should be added to the operating budget in future years. Staff will be reporting back the results of the education and enforcement pilot in 2020. Also included is 1 contract staff to support enterprise asset management and waste management. This requirement was highlighted earlier in my presentation. The net annual resources to fund the 2020 recommended level of service for waste management is $115.8 million. The base drivers are primarily inflation and lower commodity revenue for recovered paper. These will be partially offset by changes to the waste management user fees, operational process improvements, and discontinuing the collection of grass clippings. The proposed 2020 capital budget for waste management is $9.1 million. The investment is driven by the maintenance of waste facilities, purchase of new carts, and capital expenditures required to monitor and maintain closed landfill sites. This slide summarizes the overall 2020 waste management budget recommended to Regional Council. The proposed 10-year capital plan includes the construction of a mixed waste processing facility. The annual increase over the next 3 years are in line with inflation as well as the anticipated population growth. Moving on to land use planning. This service has 2 main components. First, we ensure Peel's growth plan and official policies lead to a healthy, complete community. And second, we provide one-window service to residents and businesses for connections to Peel's water and wastewater system and expansion on regional roads to service new development. Peel is expected to grow by over 500,000 people, or 37% by 2041. The region reviewed more than 3,000 development submissions in 2019, up 10% from the year before. We also saw a large jump in the number of housing units in the development process, up 40% from last year, and the intensification rate went up as well, with 50% of new units being proposed in existing communities. Approximately 80% of the residential units proposed are townhouse and apartment units, which typically involve a more complex application process than a traditional subdivision. Excuse me. To meet this growing demand, we are integrating planning, servicing, and financing across the region. Our staff have been monitoring and responding to numerous provincial policy and legislation changes, adapting our work to meet provincial requirements. And we continue to implement process improvements for development applications, such as updating the planning review process to better support customers and expedite timelines. Finally, as you heard on November 14th, there has been a fundamental shift in the type of development that are being built in Peel. The number of subdivisions has gone down, while site plan applications have gone up. Peel's fee structure for the last 12 years has been based on a subdivision model. Now that we are seeing a shift in the nature of development, there is a need for a comprehensive review of our fee structure in 2020. In order to provide ongoing and timely services to existing clients and some particularly complex files, the 2020 proposed budget includes 2 contract staff who will coordinate the review of the more complex land development applications. There is no net operating financial impact in 2020, as the staffing costs are fully funded through working fund reserves. The net annual resources to fund the 2020 recommended level of service for land use planning is $3.6 million. The 2020 budget is primarily driven by inflation. A new site plan application fee, which will be reassessed as part of the user fee review, helps to partially offset the incremental cost. The 2020 budget also includes $1.5 million for ongoing appeals to the regional official plan amendments, funds for Greenland securement, and long-range studies. Finally, this slide summarizes the overall 2020 land use planning budget recommendation to Regional Council. It should be noted here that once the user fee review is completed in 2020, this will inform our future forecasts, and I fully expect future budget increases to track closer to inflation. Moving on to roads and transportation. This service aims to provide safe, reliable, and efficient movement throughout the region. We're focusing on managing traffic in an environmentally friendly manner. We're also examining options that help people and goods move smoothly within and through our community. This year, we experienced 9 more winter events than the year before, but still maintained 100% compliance with winter road maintenance service levels. There's an ongoing need to maintain our growing and aging infrastructure. This includes arterial roads, sidewalks, multi-use trails, and paved shoulders. This is essential to keeping the community safe and connected. Peel is also a significant hub for Canada when it comes to moving goods. About $1.8 billion worth of goods move through Peel every day, and this number continues to grow. The movement of goods is important to Peel's economy and is incorporated into our overall transportation system. We are improving traffic safety through the Vision Zero strategy, which aims to reduce the number of fatalities on our roads. This year, we continued to collaborate with local municipalities, Peel Regional Police, and the OPP to improve the safety of our roads. To address congestion, we are implementing the Sustainable Transportation Strategy to encourage more people to use carpooling, public transit, and active transportation. By 2041, our goal is to have 50% of trips in the region through sustainable modes. We continue to convert streetlights to LED. This saves $400,000 annually. And we partnered with universities, all 3 levels of government and the private sector to launch the Smart Freight Center. In order for us to maintain our service levels for our growing infrastructure, additional investment is required. This includes additional lane kilometers, streetlights, traffic signals, and storm sewers. Also included is 1 contract staff to support enterprise asset management. The net annual resources to fund the 2020 recommended level of service for roads and transportation is $67.9 million. The 2020 budget recommendation is driven primarily by inflation. The incremental service demand from growth of our infrastructure is offset by the efficiencies and cost savings. The proposed 2020 capital investment for roads is $204.5 million. And this slide summarizes the overall 2020 roads and transportation budget recommendation to Regional Council. The proposed 10-year capital plan incorporates the change in planning horizon from 2031 to 2041. The annual increase over the next 3 years are in line with inflation. The final service is TransHelp. This transit service is for residents who experience a barrier to using public transportation some or all of the time. We coordinate trips for passengers using TransHelp buses, a variety of contracted providers, and other community partners. 70% of our trips are provided by external contractors such as taxis. We provide this much-needed service to more than 10,000 passengers every year, and in 2019, the number of trips increased by 14,000. We anticipate the demand will continue to increase because of Peel's growing and aging population, with more seniors living in the community with home care supports. The expanded AODA Act has also caused an increase in the complexity of our applications. And despite recent policy changes, 83% of our passengers surveyed in 2019 have told us that they are satisfied with the overall service they received. To make sure we maintain seamless transportation services, we continue to find efficiencies by leveraging conventional transit. By partnering with local municipalities, residents are offered the most suitable mode of transportation, which also creates cost efficiencies for us. We've built a travel training program that we expect to roll out early in 2020. The program provides passengers with one-on-one training and orientation on how to use conventional transit for their specific needs. We've also made some significant upgrades to this service, all based on our passenger survey results. Same-day travel was introduced this year, and online booking is expected to go live late 2020. In 2019, we introduced regular digital communications, reaching half of our passengers. We received good feedback on these communications and are looking to develop more in the future. We're in the initial phase of adding Presto as a payment option in TransHelp, which will increase the payment flexibility of this service. Finally, we're maximizing external funding sources by applying for and receiving up to $6.4 million through the Investing in Canada infrastructure program. The proposed 2020 budget includes an additional 21,000 trips to meet the increasing service demand. We're proposing 1 additional staff to support the increasing complexity and eligibility relating to the changes in the AODA legislation. We've been able to reduce our forecast to 3% growth for 2020. This is a reduction from what we presented last year. The change takes into account the actual trip growth in 2019, which was less than anticipated. The net annual resources to fund the 2020 recommended level of service for TransHelp is $26.9 million. The largest driver for growth in our budget is the service demand. We have managed to control most of the inflationary costs by finding efficiencies in our service. For example, process improvements to our cross-boundary trips and increasing the number of trips scheduled per hour. Excuse me. The proposed 2020 capital budget is $1.8 million. Approximately 31% of the budget is funded from external sources, such as the Canada Infrastructure Program and the federal gas tax. This slide summarizes the overall 2020 TransHelp budget recommendation to Regional Council. The annual increases over the next 3 years are in line with inflation and trip growth. And lastly, this slide summarizes the 2020 budget for the services presented today, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Raz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Andrew, if you're ever looking for another job, you should be doing those relaxation tapes. You're lulling us into a false sense of complacency. So, anyways, I have a few questions. I need a coffee. You mentioned under, I'm going backwards through my notes here. For land use planning, you have a number of positions that are going to be funded through reserves. Is that only funding through reserves for 2020, or is that always going to be funded through reserves, or does it get picked up in operating or capital?
Through the chair, we're adding those 2 contract staff to see if this blip in complex files is a short-term reality or a longer-term reality. If we saw something going long-term, we'd come back to council and recommend a different way of doing something, or adding these staff full-time, or looking at something else.
Okay, so that was just temporary. Bear with me. Oh, no, it was in waste management. You said that there was going to be an additional 9 staff in waste management, but there was a report coming back in the spring to look at that. So I'm wondering if it doesn't make sense to not bookmark those positions permanently in 2020 and look at it more into 2021 until we receive the report and look at future steps. Maybe I misread that.
We're getting ahead of ourselves, that we're fairly confident that report is going to say positive things and council's going to approve it. We could look at that, certainly help.
Okay. I will make that recommendation. Other question related to $39 million for MTO highway widenings. If it's not an initiative that is led by the region, do we have any cost recovery options for that?
Are you thinking in?
For the capital requests?
Capital work. So that is relocating our infrastructure. We were recovering as much as we can through that.
But is it still costing us $39 million?
If I recall, no. That's the gross cost.
Through the chair, the cost of $39 million is a gross cost, and a large portion of it is recovered pertaining to the work that's actually being directed by the Ministry of Transportation. So if they're directing it, we're getting the recovery from it.
Okay.
But if it's to our benefit, then we are compensated.
Okay, I didn't want to be out of pocket. When it comes to the 5%, I got my vernaculars mixed up between here and the city, the debt levy?
Infrastructure levy.
Infrastructure levy. So that's 5% for the next 2 years, yet for the overall regional budget, we're doing 1% over 6 years. We talked about smoothing out those bumps. Why wouldn't we look at something similar so that 5% can that be smoothed out over for the next 6 years? Why don't we do that and be consistent?
Through the chair, if I may respond to the request. Certainly, one of the things that Andrew's highlighted is that we will be doing a long-term sustainability plan next year and reporting back to that, on that to council. The 5% that's in there today, and certainly we can provide some additional information or context for the December 12th meeting, but at a high level, the money that comes in the door on the water wastewater side in particular is being spent as quickly as it comes in. So if council wishes to defer or phase that in over a longer period of time, the waste management or the water wastewater program would have to come back and identify which capital projects would be pushed out. And there is a lot of collaboration of projects between aligning our state of good repair for water and wastewater with the municipal roads, local roads projects as well. So there is a risk that some of those projects at the local level, from a roads perspective, would also be disrupted by shifting out the funding.
Okay. When you bring options back on December 12th, you'll be able to include that, correct?
We'll
just
include
to see
some
what
additional
the
information on that.
potential impacts are?
Sure, we'll have that.
I think that is it for now. I may come back on the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Daskal.
Thank you, through the chair. And I just want a clarification thing. I think I may have just missed this. Just when you're talking about the 10-year capital of investment, the 11 million, was there some more details behind that?
So which service?
This is, sorry, on slide 32. Sorry about that.
So the $11 million?
Yes.
Okay, so the main drivers for that are supporting any of our LPAT hearings that are going on. Any studies are municipal comprehensive review, Greenland securement are the main drivers for that capital program.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I just wanted to say a thank you to yourself, because there was a marketplace show a little while ago which talked about recycling and where plastics are getting diverted, et cetera. Had a whole bunch of people asking our office about that in terms of what we do on the regional side, and I just wanted to say thanks for a great response that I was able to send out to residents.
You're welcome.
Well said. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Andrew. I don't have any questions, but I just want to highlight, we always look at the increases, but I want to just highlight the savings that your department has managed to get to do over the $4.4 million. That's very good. So just want to say congratulations, and I know that you guys are going to continue to find those efficiencies and savings over time, so thank you.
Thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you very much, Andrew and staff. That brings us down to item 7.4, presentation by Catherine Matheson, Commissioner of Corporate Services.
Okay, good afternoon, Regional Chair and members of Council. With me today is Bruce Taylor. He's the Business and Financial Planning Manager who supports EPS, which is Enterprise Programs and Services for the region. I'm pleased to present to you the EPS budget, which represents all internal services, including finance, corporate services, and digital and information services. This budget will support effective and accountable government services in keeping with the leading area of focus as noted in the region's strategic plan. Continuous improvement is embedded in the business practices of the Region of Peel. This slide will highlight some of these improvements, as well as reductions generated through the line-by-line review conducted by staff. As outlined in the Continuous Improvement Program update provided to Council, on November the 14th, EPS has achieved $1 million in cost savings and $360,000 in cost avoidance. This was the result of a thorough review of expenses and revenues, by which the largest savings was achieved through reduced mobile phone costs in the value of $720,000 in annual savings. The mobile phone savings was accomplished by leveraging a larger provincial contract. With respect to cost avoidance, an investment in technology in light of increasing call center volumes enabled the region to maintain existing service levels and avoid hiring additional staff. In addition, through the new cash management strategy approved by Council on October the 10th, investment returns have increased by $6 million in 2019. The region continues to deliver excellent service outcomes, and by example, as stated by earlier in the presentations, the Region of Peel is one of only 12 Canadian municipalities with AAA rating. This is the highest rating a municipal or regional government can achieve. Council can be very proud of its leadership as the Region of Peel has achieved the AAA credit rating for 24 years in a row. As stated earlier by Stephen Van Offingen, the Region of Peel has also earned, as you're well aware, the Excellence Canada Platinum Accreditation, which recognizes outstanding achievements in organization-wide systems of management and public service delivery. The region is the only municipality or level of government to receive this exceptional recognition. And also, as noted, the Excellence of Canada is a point in time, but we continue to work towards continuous improvement and some of the recommendations made within that accreditation for continuous improvement and excellence within government service. So how are we adapting? EPS supports the organization in dealing with the changes and challenges it faces. By example, the region's corporate social responsibility strategy supports the environmental, economic, and social well-being of the Peel community. An example of this relates to sustainability and how the region procures its goods and services. The region's climate change master plan, as approved by Council on October the 24th, sets a path to achieve a low-carbon resilient community for life by 2030. The Region of Peel has the capacity through technology to enable 98% of its staff to work from anywhere at any time. For example, recently the Human Resources Division has moved to a remote, modernized workspace, which will result in an annual reduction of 260 tons of carbon dioxide emissions. This is a pilot which will be replicated by other departments in months to come. Moving on to sustainable procurement, which is also an enabler of good corporate social responsibility. The sustainable procurement model was presented to Council on October the 24th, which included the recommendation for one additional staff to procure goods and services in a manner that generates environmental, social, and economic well-being and benefits to the Peel community, consistent again with the corporate social responsibility strategy. Managing infrastructure. As the Region of Peel embraces a growing population and rapidly changing environment, the value of its assets are growing as well. The infrastructure replacement value is expected to grow from the current level of $30 billion to $35 billion by the year 2041. These additional assets will require both initial financing and ongoing future maintenance. As reported to Council in the Enterprise Asset Management Program update on November the 14th, the proposed 2020 budget includes a request for 2 full-time staffing resources in finance to be primarily funded from the utility rates, with the remaining $32,000 from the tax levy. These resources will continue supporting pressures associated with increased regulatory requirements, aging assets, climate change, and funding pressures that require a multi-year asset management plan. Moving on to the summary of the 2020 net operating budget. The net annual resources to fund the 2020 recommended levels of services are $92.7 million. The inflationary cost of $2.5 million is necessary to maintain the 2019 service levels. That increase is offset by charging utility operations for their appropriate share of EPS-related costs. In addition, increased revenues of $5.3 million are generated primarily from payments in lieu of taxes and supplemental taxation, allowing the budget to be reduced by $5.2 million. The budget contains $10.4 million for the 1% property tax levy to maintain the region's infrastructure and another $3 million to fund the Community Hubs Capital Grant Program as directed by Council. The current plan is to raise $3 million per year over the next 4 years to make a total amount of $12 million available to Council to allocate to the Community Hubs project. With respect to the capital budget, the total recommended investment in 2020 is $33.5 million. To support the state of good repair, $11.1 million is recommended for information technology and $13.1 million for the maintaining the region's office facilities. Other capital requirements of $9.2 million relate to specific technology investments such as asset management technology and investments to support the climate change master plan. So moving along to key financial information. The projected capital investments for the next 10 years total $197.2 million. As shown in the forecast for the outlook years, the operating budget is expected to further decrease in 2021 and 2022 as tax subsidization of the utility rates is further phased out. In the future, staff will explore further opportunities to reduce the operating budgets. The last component of my presentation today relates to the thriving area of the focus in the region's strategic plan. The Heritage, Arts and Culture Service is delivered through the Peel Art Gallery and Museum, commonly known as PAMA, and engages the residents through arts, history, and culture. As you're well aware, PAMA was established in 1968, and the archives were added 10 years later. Since then, it has been a central historic and cultural service in the community. Some key facts to note. Over 29,000 people visited PAMA in 2019. These visitors had access to a collection of over 5,500 works of art in the permanent collection, which is valued at over $16 million. The net annual resources to support the 2020 levels of services are $6.1 million. No new requests are being made. The increase represents inflation only. This slide summarizes the overall PAMA 2020 budget recommendation to Council. The 3-year outlook reflects the new resources to enhance programming and marketing. This will be further explained in a staff report to Council in 2020 that evaluates operations. This slide summarizes the 2020 net budget by services as presented. And that concludes our short presentation on EPS. We would be happy to answer any questions for you.
And it appears there's none. Very well done. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings me to our communication items, 8.1 and 8.2. I know they've been spoken to, and I think the councillors quite rightly have referred some questions on. Madam Clerk, have we dealt with those appropriately, or do we require something else? Oh, sorry, Councillor Parrish.
Yes, I checked with our staff after our chat this morning, and Ernst & Young took the data from the police annual report during the study that was done for the provincial report, and Mississauga staff took the $69 million amount right from the E&Y report. So what I am suggesting is we get a report back from staff here, that they go through the same process, use the same documents, and come back and give us their, I guess, reaction to what our request is, which is an equitable share of Peel Regional Police costs based on the OPP formula.
Put timing on it.
And I'd like it done fairly quickly, because I think if we get it before the police budget, it would be good, or at the police budget. The material's all there in the Ernst & Young report. Anybody got an answer as to whether we can do that?
Councillor Parrish, thank you. Through to Stephen. You've heard the latest. How can we best accommodate that?
Well, I think it's fair to stipulate that the assessment done by Ernst & Young based on the data that they had, I don't think anybody disagrees with the calculations they've done. They did provide a range of options, one of which was the OPP model. So I think for council decision-making, without being able to get access to the data or sufficient time to get the real data from police services, because that would take time to do, the estimates that EY included in the report probably stand for themselves as the figure that's there.
And I just want to make it clear, I don't think any of the councillors in Mississauga want to get rid of Peel Regional Police and go to OPP. That's not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is the same sort of cost sharing.
So the process to change from weighted assessment is the subject of a report that comes forward to council in January with respect to the apportionment report. And certainly we can provide more information on the process around how the apportionment works. The budget in of itself isn't a factor in how the dollars are apportioned, but I would certainly comfortable in stipulating that today, right now, that the work that EY did in terms of the one option that they modeled around the OPP model, the numbers are their calculation. I have no reason to believe that they made any errors in their calculations.
Okay, then I need guidance from the chair and from the clerk. If I were to move a motion based on those numbers, you're comfortable with that?
The decision for council to apportion isn't from my perspective, and I look to the clerk, it's not a budgetary decision. It's really how you apportion the gross budget for police services. And that certainly is a discussion that will come to council in the beginning of January.
Okay, could I ask then for a one-pager or a 10-liner from you that just summarizes what you just said, in that you agree with the numbers that we have in the Ernst & Young report for the budget? Secondly, we'll move a motion for the next regular regional meeting. Is that what I'm instructed to do?
Let me perhaps through the clerk and through, Carolyn, I'm going to analyze it this way, and I don't know if this is fair. I think it's a legitimate question. To me, it's the difference between, let's say in this budget, we're redoing Mayfield Road, because Mayfield Road is a regional road. If the question then becomes, but should Mayfield Road even be a regional road? That's another policy issue that we're not dealing with the budget. For the time being, it is. And I think what we're saying is in January, the larger question that you're asking, which I think is a legitimate question, I think that's all part and parcel of what the normal analysis that we need to do. But in the interim, what we have is the program that we have in place, and that's our budget. To raise the policy question is appropriate, but I'm trying to balance two balls that I've got to deal with this budget and the reality today.
Through you, Mr. Chair, what would be the first appropriate time for us to move a motion based on our numbers?
I think, and clerk can help me out, I think January is when we want to review everything that you've asked, but perhaps I'm coping as best I can. Maybe the clerk can fill that in for me a bit as well.
The next regular council meeting is December 12th. This issue is already on the books for the January meeting, yes. But the next regular council meeting that you have sufficient time to bring a notice of motion for is December 12th.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. I think, and we'll have a better understanding by then, and January's around the corner. But as I say, I'm trying to juggle two balls in terms of one's a policy, one's the budget we have before us, but a legitimate question asked nevertheless. Okay, if that then satisfies 8.1 and 8.2, knowing that something will be coming back on the 12th, I am on to other business, item 9. Oh, Madam Clerk, let's move receipt. Councillor Paris, seconded by Councillor Rass, of items 8.1 and 8.2, and to be dealt with as directed. All those in favor? That carries. Item 9, is there any other business before the chair? Seeing none. Notices of motion, there are none. Bylaws, there are none. In-camera matters.
Just a second, you gotta defer those reports from the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, items 6.1 and 6.2.
That's correct.
Those are the ones that we received the reports, and they're deferred to be dealt with at the appropriate time. So I have a motion that says that.
Yes, that's correct for both reports.
That has been moved by Councillor Santos and Councillor Starr. All those in favor? That is carried. Next motion that you have for me, Madam Clerk, is?
You did both of those together?
Did both of those together? That's right. We have nothing in camera. Do I need a bylaw to confirm the proceedings? That is moved by Councillor Vincente, seconded by Councillor Sinclair. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. A motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Grove, seconded by Mayor Crombie. All those in favor? That is carried. Well done. A good day's work, everyone. Looking forward to next week. Thank you.